Chapter 217. The battle had not subsided since it began because as long as there were spirit energy fluctuations here, the insectoids would be attracted over. It was just a matter of numbers, unless they could kill all the insectoids in the hive in one go. However, this was obviously unrealistic. Amidst the fierce battle, Lu Yi rushed into the hive under He Xian's protection. After a few hurried glances, he was forced back by the overwhelming number of insectoids. This was a very large underground space, conservatively estimated to be larger than the square in front of the Heaven's secret hall. The environment was too dark, so Lu Yi could not see clearly. As far as the eye could see, it was covered in a strange meat wall. The meat wall was densely packed with meat sacks that were bulging high, and insects were constantly bursting out of them. This was an insectoid hive. The entire insectoid hive gave off the feeling of a living creature's stomach. There was an extremely large amount of vitality inside, and this vitality was the source of the insectoid's rapid reproduction. According to fourth senior brother, the insectoids were a very special existence. After they were hatched, they would devour everything with vitality and energy. A small portion of this vitality and energy would make the insectoid stronger, while the rest would be fed back to the hive. The hive would then use this vitality and energy to breed even more powerful individuals. The insectoid hive and the insectoids had an extremely close relationship, and they complemented each other. Someone had once calculated that even if there was only one such insectoid hive, if left alone, it would only take 10 years for the entire spirit stream battlefield to be destroyed. At that time, the insectoids would become the rulers of this place. No one dared to imagine how powerful the insectoids would be if they gathered the vitality and energy of the entire spirit stream battlefield. Of course, this was impossible. Every time an insectoid tide broke out, the various large sects would do their best to contain it and eliminate it before it sprouted. Now that the Jade Blood sect had basically finished cleaning up the periphery, there were not enough insectoids to collect vitality and energy, so the scale of the insectoid tide's growth had basically been contained. Now, there was definitely a lot of vitality and energy stored in the insectoid hive, so what the Jade Blood sect needed to do was kill as many insectoids as possible. As long as all the vitality and energy in the insectoid tide were exhausted, they would win this battle. This was also the standard procedure for dealing with insect hordes in the various sects' encampment. For countless years, the various sects were very experienced in dealing with insect hordes. There would definitely be some casualties in the process, and even the large sects in the core circle could not avoid it. The insectoids in the core circle were not so easy to kill. Lu Yi had once encountered an insectoid in the Mirage realm that could blend into the surrounding environment, almost to the extent of invisibility. They attacked silently, but when they attacked, they were fatal. There were such insectoids in the core region. There were no sects in the outer circle. This was clearly the result of Tianji's mediation. Tianji would not allow the sects in the outer circle to suddenly face such a devastating disaster. However, if the hive was allowed to continue developing, such insectoids would definitely appear. In particular, there was one thing that he had to pay attention to. He absolutely could not let the insectoids obtain the cultivator's corpse. Once they obtained the cultivator's corpse, the insectoid hive would grow tremendously, and the insectoids that were bred would become even stronger. Currently, there was only one path on the Jade Blood sect's side that led to the insectoid hive. With Lu Yi guarding this place, it would not be a problem for him to defend it. All that was left was to wait for the other paths to reach the insectoid hive. This way, there would be no need to worry about the outer circle. They only needed to concentrate their forces on the insectoid hive. Considering that some places were progressing quickly while others were progressing slowly, Lu Yi had Chen Yu, Yi, and the others leave to support the other places. He stayed behind to guard this place. Soon, he was the only one left here. He did not idle around. He used the power of the Imperial equipment to provoke the insectoids in the hive again and again, luring them out to kill. He did not dare to rush in rashly. There were too many insectoids inside, and Lu Yi even felt a trace of threat in the depths of the darkness. In other words, there were definitely insectoids that could threaten his life. Soon, the path was filled with insectoid corpses. Lu Yi initially wanted to clean them up, but as he killed, there were too many of them, and he could not collect them all. Soon, he realized that something was not right. As he killed more and more insectoids, the corpses did not change much. He paid more attention and found that there were insectoids moving the corpses into the insectoid hive. This discovery made him laugh in anger. Mofa could only use his storage bag to go further and further away, and then kill his way back. Half a day later, the paths were cleared, and a complete map of the underground was drawn. From the only entrance to the wormhole, through various forks, they finally gathered at the insectoid hive. There were only 9 paths left. During this time, many people were injured and more than a dozen people died, including an entire team. They were unlucky enough to encounter the insectoids in the 7th layer. With the average cultivation of the Jade Blood sect, only a few teams with 6th order cultivators could deal with the insectoids in the 7th layer. The other teams basically died when they encountered the insectoid. Now that the various paths had been cleared, the situation was clear. As long as the Jade Blood sect could block the 9 paths, they would be able to completely control the situation. This was not a simple matter because the paths were only so big. At most, 2 or 3 people could fight side by side. The Jade Blood sect now had nearly 700 cultivators. If all of them blocked the paths, only a few people would be able to fight the insectoids head-on, and the others could only support from behind. Therefore, the correct way was to kill their way into the insectoid hive and open up a battlefield for dozens of people at each path. This way they would be able to take advantage of their numbers. What Lu Yi was concerned about was the danger hidden in the darkness. If he was not mistaken, there were definitely insectoids in the 8th layer. If it was not handled well, it would inevitably cause huge losses to the Jade Blood sect. He did not need to worry too much about 1 or 2 8th layer insectoids, but he was afraid that there would be too many of them. The reason why the insect tide was called a natural disaster was because every time it came, many cultivators would die in battle. This was not something that could be avoided by strength. Even a master like Li Baxian would die if he was not careful enough when dealing with the insect tide. Now, the only good news for Lu Yi was that the insectoids were very sensitive to spirit energy fluctuations and light sources. The stronger the insectoids, the more sensitive they were. Perhaps he could take advantage of this to do something. In front of the 9 entrances, the sound of fierce fighting continued, but because the entrances were not big, the intensity of the battle was not strong. The cultivators were switching back and forth, so they were able to hold on. Lu Yi raised his hand and tapped on his battlefield mark, sending out a message with the same content, confirming status. Soon, there was a reply. Ready. Chun Yu, everything is ready. He Xin, 5th senior brother, if I die, I must ask 6th senior sister to bury me, otherwise I will not be satisfied. Zhu Wenba, we are ready at any time, just waiting for 5th senior brother's order. Yin Haoran, ready at any time. Luo Qixing, we are in good condition. Gu Yang, everyone is in position. Kong Niu, good. Good, everyone is in good condition. Except for Kong Niu, who was in the 5th order, the weakest of the people who replied was in the 6th order. With them and dozens of cultivators supporting them, it was not a big problem to open up a battlefield near the entrance of the cave. Because they were attacking from 9 directions at the same time, the pressure they had to bear would be equally divided. As for Kong Niu's side, Lu Yi had increased the number of cultivators. They had the largest number of cultivators, almost 100. Of course, this was only the most ideal situation. After the real battle began, there would definitely be some accidents, and Lu Yi himself was prepared to deal with all kinds of accident. I am a medical cultivator, Lu Yi. Shouldn't I be treating the wounded at the back? Hua Xi's gentle voice sounded behind him. Before this, Lu Yi had already transferred Hua Xi over. It wasn't that he didn't know that Hua Xi was afraid of insects. Back in the chess sea, she had slapped a mechanical spider on Lu Ye's face, and that was only a mechanical creation. Now that they were about to face an insectide, just the thought of it made Hua Xi's hair stand on end. In fact, there were only two kinds of insects she was afraid of. One was those without legs, and the other was those with many legs. But there was no other way. All 9 passages needed someone to guard, and even if Lu Yi counted Yi and Kong Niu, there were only 8 people. The heritage of Blue Blood sect was still too weak. Left with no choice, he could only call Hua Xi over. Although she was a medical cultivator, she was still a 6th-order cultivator. It was no problem for her to guard a passage, but in this environment, it would be difficult for her to use her unique mushroom planting technique. Lu Yi turned to look at her, and their eyes met. Be strong. Hua Xi question mark. Let's begin. Lu Yi turned around. When he lowered his body, he raised his hand and pressed the hilt of his saber. With a bang, a shock wave swept out, and his whole body shot forward like an arrow. As the saber flashed, several insects blocking the entrance of the cave were chopped into pieces. Kill! With a roar, the cultivators followed Lu Yi and charged into the hive. In an instant, the already restless hive was in an uproar. A large number of insectoids surged towards them. The darkness was filled with the sound of crawling, and all they could see were the ferocious insectoids. Those with higher cultivations stood at the front, forming a semicircle with their backs against the cave entrance, while those with lower cultivations stood at the back. The light of spirit techniques and spirit talismans began to bloom as the insects rushed over. Almost at the same time as Lu Ye's group, the cultivators from the other 8 caves also rushed in. The situation was exactly the same as here, with those with higher cultivations standing at the front. A great battle was about to begin. In the midst of the battle, someone shouted a reminder, "Quick, those who are injured or have low cultivations, collect the insect corpses. Don't let the insect nest absorb them." The reason why they had to collect insect corpses during wartime was that they had no other choice. The insect nest was a very special place. It could collect vitality and energy from the hatched insects, and then breed more insects. The meat walls inside the insect nest had a very powerful ability to absorb vitality and energy. If the insect corpses were not collected as soon as possible, the vitality and energy contained in the insect corpses would be absorbed by the meat walls in a very short time. When Lu Yi had been guarding this place alone, he had found some insects moving corpses. Their purpose was to increase the vitality and energy of the insect nest. Chapter 218. Therefore, if they didn't collect the insect corpses, the insect hive could continuously devour the vitality and energy of the dead insects to breed more insects. This information came from Li Baxian. Before the start of the battle, Lu Yi specifically told them to pay attention to collecting insect corpses. For this reason, every cultivator took out their own storage pouch to ensure that every team had a few spare ones. The strength of the insects in the insect nest was generally quite strong, with the 3rd and 4th layers being common, the 5th and 6th layers not uncommon, and there weren't many 7th-layer insects, so Blue Blood sect's side was able to deal with them for the time being. The fire dragon technique was continuously used. Lu Yi was using it almost without regard for the cost, because this was the only way to kill the insects as quickly as possible. The faster they killed the enemies, the better the situation would be. With him blocking the front, the situation here quickly stabilized, but no one rushed forward because no one knew how much danger lay in the darkness. However, he was only a 7th-order cultivator, so ferociously pushing his spirit energy, and the fire dragon technique's fierce flames, brought about another problem. Less than 30 breaths after the battle began, Lu Yi sensed a powerful aura rapidly approaching from the darkness ahead. It was an 8th-layer insect. There was more than one, and judging from the movement there were at least 3. There weren't many of them, and with Lu Ye's current cultivation and strength, he had a chance to kill one in an instant. As for the remaining 2, he could work together with the dozens of cultivators here to kill them. However, just as he was about to do so, Kong Nyo's shout came from not far away, "Danger!" This was something they had agreed on long ago. Once there was too much pressure, they would immediately warn, and Lu Yi would rush over to help. He deliberately arranged for Kong Nyo to guard the cave entrance near him, considering that Kong Nyo was only a 5th-order cultivator. Even if he had enough manpower, he might not be able to stop the 7th-layer insect. Now, this arrangement was indeed prescient. Lu Yi didn't have time to deal with the 8th-floor insectoids that were about to jump out from the darkness. A pair of wings spread out from his back, and he soared into the sky. At the same time, he gripped his saber with one hand and the scabbard with the other. The scabbard shone with a blinding light, like a rising sun. The strong light illuminated the entire insect nest. Lu Yi took this opportunity to take a look, and his scalp immediately went numb. Previously, it was dark and he couldn't see the situation in the insect nest clearly. Now, with the light of the Sunshine Spirit Rune, he could see the situation in the entire insect nest. The number of insects gathered in the entire hive was beyond his imagination. Furthermore, the walls of the hive were filled with insects of all shapes and sizes. Under the attraction of spiritual energy fluctuations, they were crawling towards the place where the cultivators were gathered. "Watch your heads!" he shouted. At the same time, he paid attention to the few level 8 insectoid. If they didn't follow, it would be troublesome. Even if Hua Si stayed behind, she would not be able to stop the massacre of these level 8 insectoid. Fortunately, the insectoids had no intelligence and only knew how to follow their instincts. Lu Yi had to thank 4th senior brother for providing him with so much useful information. Lu Yi, who was holding a son, had undoubtedly become the target of the level 8 insectoids. They crawled quickly on the ground, and many of the insectoids in front of them were unable to dodge in time and were cut to pieces by their sharp claws. Not only that, at the very center of the insect nest, several more level 8 insectoids were attracted. A total of 6 level 8 insectoids. With such a lineup, if the outer sects didn't go all out, they wouldn't be able to take them down, because in the encampments of the outer sects, there were only a few level 7 cultivators, let alone level 8 ones. Generally speaking, only the garrison envoy or deputy garrison envoy would have a level 7 cultivation. Flying midair, Lu Yi sent out a fire dragon technique. The fire dragon, whose scales were faintly visible, crashed into the swarm of insects and instantly killed a large number of them. After the 2 fire dragons, the pressure on Kong Nyo's side was greatly reduced. 5th senior brother. Another shout rang out. Lu Yi hurriedly rushed in that direction. The standard procedure for the outer sects to deal with an insect tide was to find the insect nest, seal the entrance, and kill the insectoids until the vitality and energy stored in the nest was exhausted. Although this method was a bit slow, it was much safer. Even if something went wrong, they could make up for it in time. Lu Yi didn't choose to do this. Blue Blood sect took the initiative to attack, allowing its cultivators to open up a battlefield inside the insect nest. The risk was high, but the efficiency was also high. The reason Lu Yi chose to do this was because he had great mobility and could provide support at any time. It could be said that being able to fly was being capricious. This was something an ordinary level 7 cultivator couldn't compare to. For a time, Lu Yi held the sun high and constantly pushed his fire dragon technique, leading the 6 level 8 insectoids to rush around the insect nest, providing support everywhere. The situation slowly stabilized. Moreover, when the 6 level 8 insectoids chased after Lu Yi, they also caused a lot of injuries to their companions. Although the corpses of the insects killed by them couldn't be collected, it also reduced the pressure on blue blood sect's side. After the situation stabilized, Lu Yi focused his attention on the level 8 insectoids that were chasing after him. These big guys had to be dealt with quickly, otherwise they would become a hidden danger. While flying, Lu Yi summoned his hiltless short saber and sent out a fiery red stream of light. Targeting one of the level 8 monster race monsters, Lu Yi pierced its body, causing green blood to spurt out. It had to be said that the vitality of this level 8 monster race monster was quite tenacious. Lu Yi used his imperial artifact to attack it 7 or 8 times before finally killing it. The stream of light flew back to Lu Yi and was pinched between his fingertips to replenish his spirit chi before summoning it again. Maintaining his flight wings and sunshine spirit inscriptions, urging his fire dragon technique, and using his imperial artifact consumed a lot of energy. In less than half a cup of tea's time, Lu Yi had consumed nearly 70% of his spirit chi, leaving him with only 30% left. One had to know that he was now a level 7 cultivator with more than 100 spirit apertures opened, so his spirit chi reserves were no longer what they used to be. If he was still a level 5 cultivator, he would likely be a lamp without oil by now. However, Lu Yi didn't panic and simply took out a jade bottle from his storage bag, opened it, and drank its contents in one gulp. The taste was a bit strange, like fruit wine, but also a bit bitter. Restful fruit wine. The restful fruit he had brought back from the chess sea had been handed over to Shui Yuan according to 4th Senior Brother's instructions. Shui Yuan had used a variety of precious herbs to brew the restful fruit wine. Under such processing, the restful fruit wine could fully display the effects of the restful fruit wine. When senior sister Shui Yuan gave the restful fruit wine to Lu Yi, she told him that with his level 7 cultivation, a single serving of the restful fruit wine could restore 50% of his spirit chi in about 30 breaths. Unlike the powerful restorative effect of eating the restful fruit wine directly, the recovery time of the restful fruit wine was longer and its effects were reduced. However, it was better in quantity. For example, the bottle Lu Yi drank just now was a serving, while Shui Yuan gave him and Hua Ci more than 30 servings each. If it weren't for the restful fruit wine, Lu Yi wouldn't have been able to squander his spirit chi so recklessly. Squandering all of his spirit chi in such a short time was simply courting death. When the restful fruit wine entered his stomach, it immediately warmed up and a huge amount of spirit chi circulated through his spirit apertures. After 30 breaths, Lu Yi, who originally only had 30% of his spirit chi left, was once again full of vigor. He continued to provide support in all directions and took the time to kill the 8th layer insect race that was chasing him. Half an hour later, the insect race's offensive had weakened significantly. Even though the nest was still hatching new insect race insects, it couldn't keep up with the speed of the cultivators' killing. The defensive line at the cave entrance was completely stabilized, and there were only 2 8th layer insect race insects left following Lu Yi. One of them was being tortured to death by the flowing light of the imperial artifact. With the fall of this 8th layer insect race, there was only one left chasing Lu Yi. The sun that had been shining in all directions was extinguished, and Lu Yi landed in front of the cave entrance where Kong Niu was. As soon as he landed, the lone 8th layer insect race rushed over to kill him. Lu Yi drew his saber and enhanced it with sharpness spirit inscriptions, slashing the insect race's legs from the side. Green blood spilled and the insect race hissed. The human-sized insect race fell to the ground, its black carapace unable to block the sharp saber. Almost at the same time, Lu Yi flipped over and stabbed his saber into the insect race's back, coming out of its body. The insect race struggled, green blood spraying everywhere. Red light surged on the Pan Mountain saber, tearing a huge wound on its back and splitting it in half. "Kill!" Kong Niu suddenly roared. Then, cries of "kill" rose from all over the insect race's nest. 2 hours later, the cultivators at the 9 cave entrances pushed in at the same time, suppressing the remaining insect race's range of activity. Lu Yi shook off the bloodstains on the Pan Mountain saber, sheathed it, and exhaled softly. The outcome was decided. There was no need for him to do anything more. The cultivators in the sect didn't have many ways to earn merit points, so Lu Yi didn't need to compete with them. Sister Hua Xi, pull yourself together. Ruan Lingyu's voice suddenly came from the side. Lu Yi walked over. Under the light of the nearby torches, he saw Hua Xi kneeling on the ground with her legs together and her calves facing outward. Her eyes were lifeless. Ruan Lingyu stood in front of her, shaking her shoulders. Are you hurt? Lu Yi asked nervously. Ruan Lingyu shook her head, her eyes hazy with tears. Earlier, when the situation was tense, Hua Xi acted as usual, leading her junior brothers and sisters to kill the insect race's enemies. Now that the outcome was decided, she was relieved, but her confidence was ruined. After confirming that Hua Xi wasn't hurt, Lu Yi was relieved. He squatted in front of her and patted her shoulder. You'll get used to it. There won't be only one insect race. Hua Xi's eyes turned and she stared at him, her eyes full of despair. Stay with her. Call me if anything happens, Lu Yi ordered Ruan Lingyu, then turned around and walked back. Although the outcome was decided, they couldn't let their guard down as long as the insect race's nest was not completely destroyed. If a few people suddenly died at this time, it would be a real injustice. Moreover, if the information provided by fourth senior brother was correct, there were at least 2 or 3 powerful beings in the insect race's nest. They might only be from the 8th layer of the insect race, but they were more powerful than the average insect race on the 8th layer. Chapter 219. Time passed and the hundreds of cultivators from the Blue Blood sect continued to push in from all directions, just like how they dealt with the insects in the valley. Lu Yi wandered around the edge of the battlefield, occasionally taking action to kill the insects of the 7th layer to prevent any casualties. Half a day later, the insectoids in the hive were almost completely wiped out. Although there were still flesh sacs breaking on the walls of the hive and new insectoids hatching, these insectoids would often bid farewell to this beautiful world as soon as they hatched and didn't even have time to observe their surroundings. Lu Yi was currently sizing up a huge flesh sac at the center of the insect nest. This flesh sac was about the height of a person and there were vein-like things extending in all directions, connecting to every corner of the insect nest. The flesh sac itself was not the main point was the 3 8th layer insects guarding it. These 3 insectoids were clearly different from the insectoids on the 8th floor that Lu Yi had killed before. Their serrated claws were sharper, and their black carapaces were thicker. Their bodies were also larger than the insectoids on the 8th floor. They had not reached the level of the 9th layer insects, but compared to the ordinary 8th layer insects, they were undoubtedly stronger. This was the information revealed by Li Baxian. These special insectoids were protector-type existences. After the other insectoids were hatched, they would instinctively leave the hive to explore the outside world while devouring all life and energy that they encountered. However, these guards would not do so. They had been guarding the nest since the day they were born, guarding the flesh sac without leaving. Even if Lu Yi had raised a son just now, even if Blue Blood sect and the insect race were fighting fiercely, they did not pay much attention to them. This was because their mission was to guard the flesh sac. As long as they did not get close to the flesh sac, even if the other insects died, they would remain indifferent. The best way to deal with such a powerful Zerg was naturally to swarm them and beat them up together. At this moment, 200 feet away from the flesh sac, the cultivators who had been selected had formed a circle. These cultivators either knew spells or had talismans to use. There were not many people, only 100 or so. At this moment, they were all secretly circulating their spirit chi. Lu Yi gripped his hiltless dagger, and with a thought, the hiltless dagger buzzed and turned into a red stream of light, charging toward one of the insectoid guards. At the same time, Chen Yu also activated the power of his royal equipment in another direction. At the same time, over 100 spell techniques and talismans were unleashed toward the three guards. Rumbling sounds could be heard, and the fluctuations of spiritual energy became extremely chaotic at this moment. Accompanied by the unique screams of the insect race, green blood splattered, and the three guards who had been provoked immediately charged out. It's true that they won't stray too far from the meat sack, but if they're attacked, they'll definitely fight back. That's why Lu Yi specifically warned everyone not to hit these three guys. Otherwise, it'll be very troublesome. The red streak of light shuttled back and forth, penetrating the body of the insect guard rushing towards Lu Yi. Before it could run a few steps, it fell to the ground. The power of a large number of spells and talismans enveloped it. It wanted to get up, but the carapace on its body flew off, revealing the green flesh under the carapace. The other two insect guards suffered the same fate. Even if their strength was much higher than the cultivators of the Jade Blood sect, the attacks of over 100 people were not something they could withstand. The two insect guards only ran a few feet before they fell to the ground, unable to get up again. Only one managed to rush to the front of the crowd, but it was stopped by several body cultivators led by He Xian, who then cut it down. In the chaotic battle, it was unknown who killed this insect guard. With the correct response, the process of killing these three insect guards became very simple. This was the experience of the cultivators of the 9 regions who had sacrificed their lives in the past. Cheers came from all directions, and everyone was jubilant. Although this insect tide caused the Jade Blood sect to lose more than a dozen people, it was still delightful to have such results in the first insect tide. Previously, when they heard that the insect tide was coming, many cultivators with low cultivation levels were uneasy because many people would die in every insect tide. But now, it seemed that it was not a big deal. Which one of the survivors did not have a full harvest? The insect tide was not completely over yet because the insect nest had not withered. Only when the nest completely withered would the insect tide truly end. Before the nest completely withered, more insects would be hatched. Lu Yi stepped forward and walked to the meat sack in the center. This was the core of the entire insect nest. The Pan Mountain saber slightly cut open the meat sack, and a pungent smell rushed out, accompanied by a shocking life aura. He reached out and reached into the meat sack, feeling around inside. The sound of puffing made a few female cultivators with poor psychological endurance turn pale on the spot. They covered their mouths and ran to the side. Soon, Lu Yi withdrew his hand, and there was a fist-sized meat core in his hand. This meat core had an irregular shape and its surface was bumpy. It was not beautiful, but it seemed to have a life of its own as it kept jumping in Lu Ye's hand. Pure and rich life force was emitted from this meat core. There really is, he muttered. Most of the life force and energy from the insectoids that ran out of the hive were gathered in the hive. As the source of more insectoids hatched, the meat sack in front of him was the exact location of the storage. That was why this was the core of the hive and why there were specialized guards guarding it. The meat core in Lu Ye's hand was the gathering of life force and energy. The cultivation world of the 9 regions called it a life force core. This thing could not be used by cultivators. Even if it was a combination of immense life force and pure energy, it was only suitable for the reproduction of insects. There was more than one life force core in the meat sack. When Lu Yi reached out to touch it earlier, he touched several. As for how many there were, he would only know after breaking open the meat sack. As long as he broke open the meat sack and took away all the life force cores, the insect nest here would lose its life force and energy supply. It would wither in a short time, and the insect tide would be completely over. However, Lu Yi did not plan to do that. The Jade Blood sect's cultivators had too few ways to earn merit points. Now, everything in the insect nest was under his control. With 700 cultivators gathered here, every insect that hatched would be killed. This was clearly a good place to earn merit points. Therefore, after observing the life force core for a while, Lu Yi stuffed it back. the hole in the meat sack that he had broken closed in a very short time. It was clear that the insect nest had a powerful recovery ability. What happened next was simple. The 700 cultivators of the Jade Blood sect only needed to stay here and keep killing the newly hatched insects until all the life force cores in the insect nest were exhausted. There was nothing else for him to do. The small teams scattered around the insect nest and stared at the meat sacks in front of them. Every insect that came out died. Lu Yi walked over to Hua Ci and saw that her condition was much better. Only then did he relax. However, when he thought of her weak appearance just now, he wanted to laugh. In the end, she was a woman and had a weak side. Lu Yi. He suddenly ran over excitedly. There's a cave over there. I don't know where it leads. What do you mean? There's a cave over there. You'll know when you see it. Yi pulled Lu Yi and ran in that direction. Now, everyone was waiting for the insects to hatch so they could kill them. Yi had nothing to do, so she wandered around and found an unexplored cave. Soon, Lu Yi arrived at the entrance to the cave under Yi's lead. Thinking about it carefully, he found that this cave was not one of the 9 passages explored by Blue Blood sect. The entrance to the cave was dark, and he had no idea where it led to. Lu Yi looked around for a moment before suddenly squatting down and wiping the ground. He found some mucus on the ground that had not dried yet. After the insects hatched, they would have this mucus on their bodies. In other words, the insects had left through this cave not too long ago, at most a day ago. Lu Yi suddenly remembered something that Li Baxian had mentioned. His heart skipped a beat and he vaguely understood. "Do you want to go in and take a look?" he asked. "I'll go take a look." "I'll go with you," he hurriedly said. "That works too. Bring Hupo along too." "Okay." He jumped for joy and ran to find Hupo. Lu Yi called Chen Yu over and told him to take care of this place and immediately send a message if anything happened. Not long after, Lu Yi rode on Hupa deep into the cave and continued forward. On the tiger's back, Lu Yi raised his mountain saber. The sunshine spirit pattern on the scabbard continued to work, illuminating the surroundings. Yi sat in front of him while Hupa rushed forward. It was as if they had returned to the past. One man, one spirit, and one tiger, traveling together without any worries. He especially liked this feeling, and even hummed along the way. Lu Yi rested his chin on her head. Strands of hair floated in the wind, tickling his face. "Your head is so heavy," Yi protested. Lu Yi used more strength. Yi angrily shouted, "I'll tell Sister Hua Ci later and have her deal with you." "Hua Ci? Huh?" Lu Yi laughed disdainfully. If it was in the past, he really couldn't do anything to women. But now, he still had the mechanical creation from Lu Yushan in his storage bag. It was furry and had 8 claws. "Let's see if you're scared." "Lu Yi, your guts have grown fat. You're not even afraid of Sister Hua Ci now. Have you forgotten your surname?" Lu Yi raised his right hand, clenched his fist, and pressed it against Yi's head. "My surname is Lu." Yi hugged her head with both hands. "My name is Louie." Woo-woo-woo, they noisily moved forward. Until 2 hours later, there was a commotion and spirit energy fluctuation in front of them. Lu Yi and Yi quieted down at the same time. The sunshine spirit pattern dissipated, and even the running Hupa suddenly became silent. Lu Yi patted Hubo to make it stop. Lu Yi and Yi jumped down and quietly walked forward. Not long after, flickering lights were imprinted in their eyes. Chapter 220. A huge underground space appeared in Yang Kai's field of vision. This underground space was surrounded by meat walls, and with the flickering spirit energy, it was possible to see a large number of insects gathered here. This was another insect nest. However, this one was not within the range of Blue Blood sect station, but another sect's. When the insect tide arrived, every sect with a station on the spirit stream battlefield couldn't escape, so at this time, everyone had to deal with the insect tide within their own station. It could be said that every sect station had an insect nest that needed to be dealt with. Blue Blood Sect's station was almost done, with 700 cultivators guarding the underground space. Every insect that appeared died, so they were happily farming merit points. Blue Blood Sect was able to settle the overall situation so quickly because Lu Yi had chosen a more radical approach, so their efficiency was very high. But the situation here was different. The cultivators of this sect had chosen the most standard way to deal with the situation, which was to block the entrance of the insect nest and constantly lure the insects out to kill them. This method was not very efficient, but it was more reliable. It could be said that 90% of the sects in the outer circle would choose this method. After all, not every sect protector could fly like Lu Yi and provide support at any time. On top of that, his strength had surpassed the 7th order. It was because of this that Lu Yi chose this radical approach. It turned out that this method was very effective, otherwise, Blue Blood Sect's current situation would have been the same as what they were seeing now, and it would have taken many more days to deal with the insect nest. Lu Yi being able to arrive here meant that Blue Blood Sect's insect nest was connected to the one here. This kind of situation rarely happened because most insect nests were independent of each other. But such a thing had happened before. According to 4th Senior Brother, when an insectoid nest developed to a certain extent, it would devour other insectoid nests to strengthen itself. That powerful insectoid nest would have insectoids digging underground to find the location of other insectoid nests. Blue Blood Sect hadn't dealt with an insect tide for many years, and every time an insect tide came, the insect nests in Blue Blood Sect's station would develop rapidly. Over the years, the nearby sects would first deal with the insect nests in their own stations before joining forces to deal with Blue Blood Sects, because if they didn't take action, the insect tide would grow larger and larger, and they would inevitably be affected. Sometimes they even needed to ask the sects in the inner circle or the core circle to deal with it. Because too much time had passed, the insect tide in the Blue Blood Sect's territory had developed to the point where the sects in the outer circle were helpless. That explained why the two hives were connected. It was because the insectoids had opened up a passage between them. However, no one had expected that Blue Blood Sect would deal with this matter so quickly this time. While this sect was still slowly being cleaned up, the other side had already secured victory. Shouts could be heard coming from the passageways, occasionally mixed with screams. Someone must have been injured. Even if they were to block the entrance and lure the insectoids to kill them, it was not necessarily safe. Once the number of insectoids reached a certain level, it was possible for them to break through the defensive line and cause a large number of casualties to the cultivators. Lu Yi didn't know which sect this was. Currently, there were 3 forces that bordered the Blue Blood Sect's territory. 2 of them were from the 10,000 Devil Ridge and 1 was from the Grand Heaven Alliance. From the picture, these 3 sects were arranged in a triangular formation, with the Blue Blood Sect in the middle. The 3 forces were Bai Tao Courtyard, Tian Sha Hall, and the Feng family. Bai Tao Courtyard belonged to the Grand Heaven Alliance, and was located to the west of the Blue Blood Sect. It was also a rank 9 sect. Tian Sha Hall was a rank 8 sect, and was located to the north of the Blue Blood Sect. The Feng family was a rank 9 sect, and was located to the east of the Blue Blood Sect. Lu Yi recalled the direction he had come from and took out the picture to compare. He found that his current position was close to Tian Sha Hall's territory. In other words, the cultivators who were dealing with the insectoids were from Tian Sha Hall. They had many experiences dealing with insect tides, so the Tian Sha Hall situation was considered stable. As long as they were given enough time, they would definitely be able to clean up the insectoids here. Before Lu Yi came to the territory, the lone cultivators of the Blue Blood Sect were often bullied by Tian Sha Hall and the Feng family. If it weren't for Bai Tao Courtyard, those lone cultivators wouldn't have had a place to live. From Chen Yu, Lu Yi learned a lot of things. There was actually a mineral lode in Blue Blood Sect's territory, and above that mineral lode was an orchard. Whether it was the mineral lode or the spirit fruits produced in the orchard, They could all be considered the sect's resources. However, because the Blue Blood sect was empty all year round, it was occupied by Tian Sha Hall. For so many years, no one went to find trouble with them. When Lu Yi learned about this, he didn't pay attention to it because it hadn't been long since he took in those disciples. It wasn't wise to rashly have any large-scale conflicts with other sects. At the very least, he had to wait until the cultivators had some sense of belonging to the Blue Blood sect. Now, it seemed that this might be an opportunity. After observing for a while, Lu Yi shrank back and waved at Yi whispered into her ear. Lu Yi whispered a few words. Yi nodded. I understand. With that said, she rode on Hupu and returned the way they came. The battle between Tian Shao Hall's cultivators and the insect clan was in full swing. No one expected that a pair of eyes in the darkness had already set their eyes on them. When they came, Lu Yi didn't know the situation in the tunnel, so he didn't explore very quickly. However, Yi didn't have to worry about returning. The tunnel itself was safe and there were no traces of the insect clan. Therefore, after more than 2 hours, Yi rode on Hupu and returned. Hupo's body was covered with storage pouches. A conservative estimate was that there were 200 to 300 of them. They were all collected from the sect's cultivators. After meeting up with Lu Yi, Yi handed him another storage pouch. It's all here. Also, Sister Hua Ci has already brought everyone out of the wormhole to repair as you instructed. The nest on our side has already begun to wither. Very good. Lu Yi, will this really work? Yi could clearly tell that Lu Yi was up to no good. Who knows? There's no harm in trying. At most, we'll lose some insect corpses. With that said, Lu Yi took a few storage pouches from Hupo's back and quietly walked to the entrance of the cave. He opened the storage pouches and poured the insect corpses inside into the nest. There were actually insect clan members here as well. However, because the Tian Sha Hall's cultivators had caused too much of a commotion on the other side, the insect clan's attention had been drawn there. This was also the reason why Lu Yi could safely hide here. The insect clan was very sensitive to light sources and fluctuations of spiritual power. As long as Lu Yi didn't cause too much of a commotion, he basically wouldn't attract the insect clan's attention. When a large number of insect corpses appeared, a few insect clan members who were caught off guard stumbled and screeched. Those insect clan members looked left and right but didn't find anything. Instead, they were stunned by the extra insect corpses. Immediately after, many insect clan members rushed over from all directions and moved the insect corpses to various parts of the nest. The life force and energy contained in the insect corpses were completely absorbed by the nest in an extremely short period of time. All the insect corpses seemed to have been weathered for thousands of years and turned into dust. These insect clan members had just finished their work when another large pile of insect corpses appeared. The insect clan members clearly didn't know what had happened. They probably didn't have any intelligence and would never have thought that there would be a day when someone would be kind enough to feed them. Driven by their instincts, many more insect clan members rushed over and moved the large number of insect corpses away. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, one side happily fed the insect clan members while the other side digested the food quickly. They formed a perfect cooperation. 50 storage bags were emptied, 100 storage bags were emptied, 150 storage bags were emptied. Lu Yi didn't know if this would be effective. However, if things developed according to his plan, things would be interesting. Just as he was engrossed in feeding the insect clan members, the battle between the Tian Shao Hall cultivators and the insect clan members gradually became more intense. A puzzled voice came from one of the cave entrances. "Senior brother, why are there more and more insect clan members? There were even fewer of them just now." "Don't talk nonsense. Hurry up and kill them. The more you kill, the fewer there will naturally be." Oh. At first, only 1 or 2 cultivators at the cave entrances noticed this abnormality. They thought that it would only be a temporary phenomenon. After all, the number of insect clan members in the insect clan's nest was limited. They would definitely be able to kill them all. Over the years, they had dealt with the insect clan members in the same way. This time was no exception. However, as time passed, more and more cultivators realized that something was wrong. The more insect clan members killed, the more insect clan members there were. There were a few times when the insect clan members' defenses were breached and many of them were injured or killed. Lu Yi silently listened to the Tian Sha Hall cultivators talk as he fed the insect clan members. After confirming that he was right, he worked even harder. After throwing all the remaining insect clan members' corpses into the insect clan's nest, Lu Yi took out a palm-sized meat core from the storage bag that Yi had specially given him. A life core. This thing was the crystallization of life force and energy. It was also the source of the insect clan's nest. For this plan, Lu Yi had even stopped his sect's disciples from earning merits in advance. He had asked Yi to take out all the life cores. Otherwise, the insect clan's nest wouldn't have withered so quickly. He didn't know how many insect clan members' corpses were needed for this life core. Weighing the life core in his hand, Lu Yi casually tossed it into the insect clan's nest. "I'll give you a big gift. I hope you don't fail to appreciate it." Yi had brought a total of 8 life cores from the insect clan. The reason there were so many was because the Jade Blood sect had dealt with the insect clan too quickly. They hadn't had time to use these life cores. After an incense stick's worth of time, the sound of life cores popping could be heard from all over the insect clan's nest. Hearing this sound, Lu Yi couldn't help but worry for the Tian Sha Hall cultivators. He was familiar with this sound. It was the sound of the insect clan's insect clan hatching. Just by listening to this sound, he knew that a large number of newborn insect clan members had been born. He hoped that the Tian Sha Hall cultivators could hold on. A miserable cry came from one of the caves, followed by more miserable cries. Someone shouted angrily, "Why are there so many big guys all of a sudden?" Someone else shouted, "Hold on, don't let them break through the defenses. Senior brother, save me. We can't hold on any longer." In the darkness, Lu Yi threw a spirit pill into his mouth and called out to Yi. "Let's go." The initial plan was going smoothly. It was time to move on to the next step. Chapter 221. 50 kilometers away from the Jade Blood sect's encampment, there was a valley with a huge hole in the middle. It was a wormhole. Just like the Jade Blood sect's encampment, this valley was barren, and even the ground had been scraped off several layers. The valley was filled with the green color of dried insect blood, and there were also some broken limbs and pieces of flesh that had not been cleaned up. On a nearby mountain peak, hundreds of cultivators from the Jade Blood sect were quietly lying in ambush, all of them nervous and apprehensive. Half a day ago, everyone had been happily farming merit points in the insect nest, but they were suddenly brought to this place by Hua Ci, followed by Lu Yi. It was obvious that something was up. The cultivators could vaguely sense the intentions of their guardian and deputy. It would be a lie to say that they were not nervous, because the only large-scale operation they had participated in before was the insect tide that had just been dealt with. Fortunately, with their previous experience, each team had some experience in cooperating. They had already dealt with the insect tide, so why would they be afraid of the current situation? The mountain breeze blew, and the cultivators were quiet. Lu Yi quietly looked at the valley for a moment and frowned. Why haven't they come out yet? Before he left, the Heavenly Fiend sect was clearly showing signs of weakness. Logically speaking, they should have come out long ago, unless they had stabilized their formation. If that was the case, they could only take the initiative to attack. While the Heavenly Fiend sect cultivators were fighting fiercely with the insect tribe, they could passionately stab them in the back. They could kill all the Heavenly Fiend sect cultivators underground and also deal with the insect tide at the same time. It would be killing 2 birds with 1 stone. However, this was not a small risk. If they fought fiercely in the narrow underground passage, it would be easy for their side to suffer a large number of casualties. Therefore, Lu Yi wanted to wait for the Heavenly Fiend sect cultivators to retreat and kill them when they were unprepared. As long as they blocked the entrance of the hole, the Jade Blood sect could cooperate with the insect tide and attack from two sides, killing the Heavenly Fiend sect cultivators in the hole. Hua Ci, we have to be more careful next time. We can't just focus on the head. Lu Yi was a little emotional because he found that the Heavenly Fiend sect had left a few cultivators at the entrance of the hole. This way, if there were any abnormalities, they could immediately investigate and inform the others. On the other hand, the Jade Blood sect's cultivators had all come out when the insect tide arrived, and the entire encampment became empty. It was the same when they entered the wormhole, and no one was left outside. Hua Ci glared at him bitterly. I have mushrooms. That's good. Lu Yi felt relieved. Suddenly, there was a movement from the battlefield imprint. Lu Yi hurriedly checked and raised his eyebrows. It's here. This message had come from Yi. Since the sect master had accepted Yi as a disciple of the Blue Blood sect, Yi had gained her own battlefield mark. She was a spiritual body, so if she wanted to, she could turn into an illusory form and come and go without a trace. She was the most suitable person to scout for information in this situation. Previously, when Lu Yi brought her here, he had asked her to go deep into the ground to investigate the situation. After waiting bitterly for a long time, she finally received news from me. He stood up abruptly and mounted the white tiger. He pulled Hua Ci up as well and shouted, "Let's go!" Hu Pu sprinted down the mountain. A gust of wind blew against his face, ruffling Hua Ci's hair. Behind the two of them, hundreds of cultivators from the Blue Blood sect followed. They didn't shout, but with hundreds of cultivators moving together, their momentum was extremely shocking. Many of these cultivators had been bullied by the two nearby factions of Myriad Devil Ridge. Many of their friends had even died because of this. They naturally hated the nearby Heavenly Fiend Temple and Foam Clan to the bone. Even if they hadn't been bullied before, the natural opposition between their factions wouldn't make them feel any sympathy. When they were halfway up the mountain, Lu Yi suddenly squatted down on the white tiger's back and shouted into Hua Ci's ear, "I'll go first." The formation here was too large. It would be very easy for the cultivators from the Heavenly Fiend Temple, who were patrolling the entrance of the wormhole, to discover them. To prevent them from sending out any information, they had to kill them before that happened. Lu Yi activated his spiritual power, and a pair of fiery red wings spread open on his back. He turned into a red streak of light and flew in that direction. There were only 5 cultivators from the Heavenly Fiend Temple guarding the entrance of the wormhole. At this moment, they were all panicking. It wasn't that they had discovered the Blue Blood sect's attack, but that they had contacted their fellow disciples in the wormhole and learned that the situation inside was very bad. Now, the cultivators from their sect were fighting and retreating. They were probably about to retreat. How could this be? A fair-skinned man muttered, "This shouldn't be." The Heavenly Fiend Temple had dealt with this kind of insect tide many times and had accumulated rich combat experience. Even if there were casualties every time, they could usually deal with them properly. However, this was the first time they had been beaten back by an insect tide. According to Senior Brother Lu, the insect tide suddenly became much more violent for some reason. That's why there were changes. Plop! A person knelt on the ground, tears streaming down his face. He softly murmured, "Junior sister's son is dead." Then he pressed his head against the ground. "Junior sister's son is dead. Cheer up, Junior Brother Gua. Junior sister's son isn't the only one who died. Junior sister's son is dead. What's the point of me living?" Junior Brother Gua suddenly stood up and was about to jump into the wormhole. His eyes were bloodshot. "I'll go kill those smelly insects." Someone beside him hurriedly grabbed him by the waist. "Don't be rash. Senior Brother He Meng is already on his way back. What we need to do now is to help them." "What's that?" someone suddenly exclaimed. The others followed his gaze and saw a fiery red light rapidly flying over. In the blink of an eye, it was already in front of them. The light faded, revealing a person's figure. The few of them were stunned for a moment because the fiery red light was a pair of spiritual power wings on the person's back. Then, a scene that made their hair stand on end appeared. The person pinched a stream of light in his hand. The stream of light swept up and passed through their bodies like a butterfly. Blood splattered everywhere. The cultivators from the Heavenly Fiend Temple all fell to the ground. The wings on Lu Ye's back dissipated and he crashed to the ground. The handleless short knife flew back and was put away by him. Fortunately, no news of this had spread. He came to the entrance of the wormhole and looked down. It was dark below and he couldn't see clearly. He bent down and pressed his ear to the ground. He could vaguely hear a rumbling sound coming from afar. Frowning, he looked back and found that it was his own cultivators. Hua Xiai, who was riding on Hu Po, was the first to arrive. She quickly planted mushrooms nearby. Although these mushrooms might not be of any use, it was better to be prepared. A moment later, the cultivators from the Jade Blood sect arrived. Pairs of eyes looked at Lu Yi. Some were excited, some were nervous, and some were a little hesitant. They couldn't understand how the situation had developed to this point. Everyone, surround it. Whoever comes up later will die. Following Lu Ye's order, everyone spread out, surrounding the huge wormhole with 3 layers inside and 3 layers outside. Body cultivators and weapon cultivators, stand forward and protect the spell cultivators beside you. Don't be in a hurry to attack. Wait for my orders before attacking. Also, don't fall. If you fall, you'll die. Just as the arrangements were made, Yi came out from the ground nearby. Many people were surprised to see Yi's ability for the first time. They're here. Yi stood beside Lu Yi and shouted softly. Rumbling sounds came from below the wormhole, accompanied by the sounds of fighting. The cultivators from the Heavenly Fiend sect had escaped through the tunnels. Hurry up! Someone roared from below. Move faster! The ropes hanging down from the wormhole suddenly went taut. As the ropes shook, figures quickly climbed up from below. The cultivators climbed up the wormhole at a height of more than 100 feet. The first cultivator climbed to the entrance of the wormhole and shouted anxiously, "Hurry up and give me a hand." As he spoke, he stretched out his hand. No one pulled him up. The cultivator looked up and saw that there were many people standing in front of him, looking down at him from above. Why are there so many of us up there? The cultivator could not help but be confused. Why haven't I seen these people before? Why are they all raising their spiritual weapons? Spiritual power surged, and fire dragons whose scales could be vaguely seen roared and danced. As the word "kill" was uttered, the power of spells and spiritual talismans started to be released. Those who did not know spells or spiritual talismans raised their spiritual weapons and slashed at the enemies who climbed up the wormhole. Screams were heard instantly. The cultivators' corpses fell down one after another. Even the cultivators who were climbing up were not spared. The sudden change made the cultivators from the Heavenly Fiend sect panic. No one knew what happened above. Soon, someone shouted, "It's the people from the Haotian Alliance." Only the people from the Haotian Alliance would ambush them here. As for which sect they were from, no one knew. At this time, almost all the sects were dealing with the insect tide. Who would have the time to ambush others? This news spread quickly. The cultivators from the Heavenly Fiend sect, who were lucky enough to survive, were in despair. The people from the Haotian Alliance were lying in ambush above, and a large number of insects were chasing after them. How could they survive if they were attacked from 2 sides? In a passage near the wormhole, a soldier holding a long spear was fighting a bloody battle. He was the garrison of the Heavenly Fiend sect, He Meng. He was a 7th Order cultivator who had enlightened more than 130 apertures. Previously, the insect tide suddenly became violent and disrupted the original deployment of the Heavenly Fiend sect. He had no choice but to order his cultivators to retreat as they fought. Although they paid a price, they were able to retreat safely to the wormhole. As long as they retreated to guard the wormhole's entrance and rested, the Heavenly Fiends sect could fight again. It was just an insect tide. The Heavenly Fiends sect had dealt with it countless times. However, the spiritual power fluctuations behind him and the terrified screams made him realize that something was wrong. He quickly asked and received a reply. There are people from the Humane Alliance ambushing above the wormhole? Which force are they from? How crazy are they? Don't they have to deal with the insect tide on the ground? Although this was unbelievable, Humane soon realized that they were in a terrible situation. The Heavenly Fiends sect was stuck in the middle. How could they have a good ending? Chapter 222. Senior Brother what should we do? A sixth-order realm cultivator covered in insect blood asked. Should we send a message to Senior Brother Ching and ask him to lead some people to help us? Someone suggested. Unlike Blue Blood sect, who had sent out all their forces to deal with the insect tide, other sects would leave some disciples to guard their station. The station was the foundation of the sect, so they couldn't be careless at all times. Take Heavenly Fiend Temple as an example. They had sent out about 500 cultivators this time, and there were more than 100 left behind at the station, including the station's vice envoy, Ching Bo. He was also a seventh-order cultivator, but he had just broken through. Heavenly Fiend Temple's cultivators were in a bad situation. The insect tide was surging over, and there were Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators at the exit of the wormhole. They were in a dilemma. If they wanted to escape, asking Ching Bo to lead some people to help them was the best choice. It's too late. Humane shook his head. Even though the station was only 10 kilometers away, it would take Ching Bo some time to gather people. By the time they arrived, it would be too late. Follow me and kill our way out. Humane's eyes flashed fiercely. He didn't know which great force they were from, but he was still a seventh-order cultivator who had experienced life and death several times, so he wasn't scared by the predicament in front of him. He knew that if they wanted to survive, they had to kill their way out. Staying here was just waiting for death. The insect tide this time was unexpected. They didn't know why it suddenly became so fierce, causing Heavenly Fiend Temple to be defeated. Time was of the essence. Humane ordered the left and right to block the insect tide while he retreated. He ordered a few sixth-order cultivators to follow him. After a dozen breaths, a few fifth-order cultivators squatted down at the bottom of the wormhole with their hands folded over their knees. One of them shouted, "Come!" A few dozen meters away, Humane and the sixth-order cultivators ran. In an instant, they arrived in front of the fifth-order cultivators and stepped on their junior brother's folded hands. "Go!" The fifth-order cultivators roared in unison. Spirit chi surged from their bodies and they pushed their hands up. Humane and the others used this force to soar into the sky and reach the top of the wormhole in an instant. Humane, whose spirit chi was surging and his face was filled with murderous intent, felt a chill in his heart because he saw that the entrance of the wormhole was filled with people from all directions. Why are there so many? Previously, he heard that there were cultivators from the Grand Heaven Alliance lying in ambush at the entrance of the cave. He thought that there wouldn't be many of them because at this time, every sect was dealing with the insect tide in their own territory. Even if they had extra people to send out to harass the enemy forces, there wouldn't be many of them. But now it seemed that this idea was completely wrong. 600 to 700 people, this was almost the number of cultivators in the entire sect. Is this sect really not going to deal with the insect tide in their own territory? Before he could even finish his thoughts, 2 streaks of light had already struck him, followed by a series of spell techniques and talismans. Screams rang out beside him as the few sixth-order cultivators who had rushed out with him fell down like dumplings before they could even see the situation in front of them. Only Humane, with his seventh-order cultivation and the long spear in his hand, managed to block a few attacks, but in the next moment, a fiery red stream of light pierced through his body, bringing with it a spray of blood. His figure rapidly fell downwards, but a fire dragon chased after him closely. Beside the wormhole, Lu Yi was a little surprised. These guys really know how to play. He vaguely understood how these people had rushed up and what their original plan was. Unfortunately, the enemy had obviously underestimated the number of people on their side and their strength. This led to the enemy's death after just showing their faces. At the bottom of the wormhole, the fifth-order cultivators who had sent Humane and the others up watched as their senior brothers left quickly and returned quickly. Along with them was a burning fire dragon. Crackling sounds could be heard as corpses fell to the ground one after another. Flames engulfed the area and a burnt smell filled the air. The Heavenly Fiend Temple cultivators who had been climbing up with the help of ropes were also burned until they became dizzy and fell down screaming. "Senior brother he!" Someone shouted and rushed to Himeng's side to extinguish the flames on his body. Himeng was already gasping for breath at this moment. He was injured by Lu Ye's imperial artifact and was hit by a fire dragon technique. It was already a miracle that he didn't die. He suddenly raised his hand and grabbed the fifth-order cultivator's collar, gritting his teeth as he shouted, "It's the Jade Blood Sect." The moment he fell, he saw a big white tiger and the young man beside it. How could he not know who the attacker was? After saying this, Himeng's head tilted and he stopped breathing. The fifth-order cultivator next to him had tears in his eyes, but there was no time to grieve. The insect tide had already rushed out and the entrance of the wormhole was blocked by the Jade Blood Sect cultivators. Himeng was dead, and so were his sixth-order senior brothers. The Heavenly Fiend Temple cultivators had no way to survive. Screams rang out one after another. Without a sixth-order or seventh-order cultivator, the remaining people couldn't resist the insect tide at all. Some people were unwilling to die like this and tried their best to climb up the wormhole, but they would still die at the hands of the Jade Blood Sect cultivators. The fifth-order cultivator stood up and raised his hand to tap on his battlefield mark. A message was sent out, and he immediately picked up his spirit artifact and turned to kill the insect tide. Since he was going to die, he would die at the hands of these insects. He couldn't let the Jade Blood Sect take advantage of him. There were many people who had the same resolve as him. For a time, the battle was extremely tragic as cultivators screamed and fell one after another. 10 kilometers away, in the Heavenly Fiend Temple's encampment, Ching Bo, who received the news, suddenly turned pale. Defender Himeng was dead, the insect tide was difficult to contain, and the entrance of the wormhole was blocked by the Jade Blood Sect. Heavenly Fiend Temple was in a dilemma, and the survivors wanted to fight to the death with the insect race. He hurriedly checked the battlefield imprint on his body and felt the familiar imprints disappearing one after another. Ching Bo fell into a chair. At this time, many disciples who stayed behind had received the news from the wormhole and hurried over to ask about it. Seeing Ching Bo like this, how could they not know that the situation was worse than they imagined? Jade Blood Sect. Ching Bo gnashed his teeth, his eyes bloodshot. Ching Bo naturally knew a lot about this famous neighbor of his, especially after the battle on Golden Light Peak where Lu Yi became famous. When Ching Bo and Himeng chatted in private, they both expressed their worry and vigilance about the Jade Blood Sect. This was a very strange sect that hadn't accepted any disciples for several decades, but suddenly accepted one and did such a shocking thing. Lu Yi was a fifth-order cultivator and had fought 43 battles on Golden Light Peak without a single defeat. If he broke through to the seventh order, the two of them might not be his opponent. Fortunately, Lu Yi had been very stable during this time. Before the battle on Spirit Creek, there was no news of Jade Blood Sect accepting disciples. This made the two defenders of Heavenly Fiend Temple feel a little relieved. No matter how strong Lu Yi was, it would be difficult for him to accomplish anything alone. But after the battle on Spirit Creek, a piece of news came that made the two of them feel uncomfortable. The Jade Blood sect opened its doors and accepted disciples, accepting 100 registered disciples in one go. 500 or 600 rogue cultivators had joined them. This was already a force that could not be ignored. These days, the Heavenly Fiend Palace had actually been on guard against the Jade Blood sect. They were afraid that Luye would not know his place. Fortunately, their worries were unnecessary. The Jade Blood sect had been standing aloof from worldly affairs. Who would have thought that this was just a facade? On the surface, Jade Blood sect was aloof from worldly affairs, but in the dark, they had dealt a heavy blow to Heavenly Fiend Temple. A total of 493 cultivators had been completely wiped out in less than 2 hours. Even Defender He Meng had died. Heavenly Fiend Temple had never suffered such a huge loss since its establishment. Lu Yi, you and I are irreconcilable. Qing Bo's roar resounded throughout Heavenly Fiend Temple's station, and the remaining 100 or so disciples all looked sad. At this time, at the entrance of the wormhole, hundreds of Jade Blood sect cultivators were waiting in boredom. Since just now, no more Heavenly Fiend Temple cultivators had climbed up, and the screams at the bottom of the wormhole had become sparse. This made it impossible for them to earn merit points even if they wanted to. After a while, there were no more screams. Rustling sounds could be heard from below. The insect tribe had climbed up. The hundreds of cultivators immediately became excited. Previously, everyone had been happily earning merit points in the insect tribe's nest. In the end, E had come over and taken away the life core, causing the nest to wither. Many people had not had enough fun. Now the opportunity had come again, and it had been snatched. The principle that flowers at home were not as fragrant as wild flowers was applicable everywhere. Qin Yu said excitedly, "Fifth senior brother, should we kill them?" With the experience of dealing with the insect tribe once, as long as they did the same as before, Jade Blood sect would be able to kill their way into the insect tribe's nest again. Lu Yi shook his head and waved his hand. "Retreat." Qin Yu was stunned. "Retreat! Retreat!" Following Lu Ye's order, hundreds of cultivators rumbled away. Although no one knew what Lu Yi wanted to do, this was an order from the defender. Regardless of whether they were registered disciples or rogue cultivators, they had to obey. On the mountain peak where they had set up an ambush, hundreds of people rested and waited. Lu Yi stood at the peak and looked down at the valley below. He said to retreat, but they had only retreated to this place. Hua Ci stood beside Lu Yi and asked in confusion, "What are you doing?" Lu Yi looked down at the insect tribe slowly gathering in the valley below, and was faintly worried. "We might have raised a group of monsters." "What do you mean?" Hua Ci frowned. "Haven't you noticed that these insect tribe members are generally stronger than our side? Of course, the weaker ones being killed by the Heavenly Fiend Temple is part of the reason, but it's not the main reason." "Then what is it?" Fourth senior brother told me before that when fighting against the insect tribe, we must not let the insect tribe easily obtain cultivator corpses. It's not just because the energy contained in a cultivator's body is very large, but there are other reasons. If the insect tribe obtains them, they will be significantly strengthened. He sighed softly. Approximately how many people from the Heavenly Fiend Temple died in the wormhole? The corners of Hua Ci's eyes twitched. At least 300 or 400, right? Then it's over. The insect tribe here is not something the sects in the outer circle can handle. Chapter 223. The strength of the insect race could be roughly determined by their size. The fist-sized insect race did not pose any threat to cultivators. The wash-basin-sized insect race was equivalent to a second or third-order cultivator. As for the longer insect race, they had to be careful because they were most likely 6th or 7th order insect race. Half a day after Lu Yi ordered the disciples to retreat, the valley below was densely packed with insect race, many of which were as tall as a human. The cultivators were secretly shocked at the sight and were all glad that they did not go deep into the wormhole before. The average strength of the insect race here was more than a grade higher than that of the blue blood sect. If they had rashly entered the wormhole before, there would have been a large number of casualties. This was only the situation in the insect valley. The situation in the insect nest would definitely be even more severe. There would definitely be 8th order insect race in there, and there might even be 9th order insect race. Lu Yi gave a few instructions to Hua Si before summoning Hu Pu and jumping onto the tiger's back. Under the gazes of many cultivators, he rode on Hu Pu and charged into the valley. When he was close enough, he raised his hand and sent out a fire phoenix technique into the swarm of insects. Spirit energy exploded and several insect race cultivators were sent tumbling. The insect race was very sensitive to spirit energy fluctuations, so after Lu Yi sent out a spirit technique, a large number of insect race cultivators immediately swarmed towards him. The sound of them crawling was so dense that it made one's scalp go numb. Hu Pu roared and carried Lu Yi around the periphery of the insect valley. As Lu Yi sent out one spirit technique after another, more and more insect race cultivators followed behind him. There were even spider-like insect race cultivators that spat spider silk at them. Looking down from the mountain peak, the cultivators of the Jade Blood sect all broke out in cold sweat for Lu Yi. From their point of view, Lu Yi was riding on Hu Pu and charging down alone, provoking the countless insectoids and causing a large number of insectoids to chase after him. No one knew why Lu Yi was doing this. After an incense stick worth of time, Lu Yi circled around the valley. Most of the insect race cultivators in the valley were alarmed and chased after him. Those that did not chase after him were also restless. Insect race cultivators had a very strange connection with each other. This connection allowed them to communicate within a certain range in a special way that only insect race cultivators could understand. Therefore, under normal circumstances, provoking one insectoid was equivalent to provoking a group of them. If he provoked a group of them, it would be the same as provoking all of the insectoid. Countless insectoids crawled in pursuit, led north by Lu Yi. However, the valley did not become empty because of the departure of the insectoids, because an endless stream of insectoids crawled out from the wormhole and joined the pursuit. Looking down from above, one could see a long line of insectoids converging behind Lu Yi, heading straight for the wormhole. Really? Hua Si was stunned for a moment. When Lu Yi told her about the plan earlier, Hua Si felt that it wasn't very reliable. The insectoids had no sense of reason and only followed their instincts. But now, it seemed that it was precisely because they had no sense of reason that they were easy to control. Calming her mind, she followed Lu Ye's instructions and led the hundreds of cultivators from Blue Blood sect towards the north. 10 kilometers away from here was Heavenly Fiend Temple's camp. In the camp, Deputy Guardian Ching Bo and a group of cultivators from Heavenly Fiend Temple, who had stayed behind to guard the camp, were still immersed in an atmosphere of grief and anger. No one would have thought that a disaster was rumbling towards them, and this disaster was a big gift from Lu Yi, whom Ching Bo had been thinking about. At this moment, Ching Bo was using his imprint to send a message to the higher-ups of his sect, reporting what had happened in the camp. When he learned that the losses here were so heavy, an elder vomited blood on the spot and fell to the ground, unable to get up. The losses were too great. Nearly 500 cultivators had been completely wiped out in the wormhole. This was something that had never happened before. Just as more than 100 cultivators from Heavenly Fiend Temple, who had stayed behind to guard the camp, were immersed in a sorrowful atmosphere and unable to extricate themselves, an explosion suddenly sounded, followed by the chaotic movement of spiritual power. Ching Bo suddenly raised his head. At first, he was stunned, but then he reacted and flew into a rage. How dare you! He didn't know who was attacking the defensive array of the camp. He was filled with grief and indignation. Although the Heavenly Fiend Temple was only a grade 8 sect, it had been established for decades. In all these years, it had never suffered such great humiliation. Now that a few hundred cultivators had died in the camp, someone had come to attack the array. Was the Heavenly Fiend Temple really a pushover? He flashed out, followed by a large group of cultivators who were filled with grief and indignation. When he raised his head, he immediately saw a figure flying in the sky, a pair of fiery red spiritual power wings flapping behind him. "Who are you?" Ching Bo shouted angrily. His shout seemed to have frightened the person who had come. The fiery red wings flapped and quickly flew into the distance, disappearing in the blink of an eye. "You've gone too far." Ching Bo was furious. He didn't understand what that person meant. Senior brother," a cultivator behind him suddenly said in a trembling voice, pointing in front of him with a frightened expression. "Insect clan, insect tide." At this moment, Ching Bo also realized that something was wrong. In his field of vision, a large number of insect clan members were swarming towards them. The insect clan members were densely packed and lined up in a long line. They meandered from the direction of the insect valley, and he couldn't see the end of them. Ching Bo's face suddenly turned pale, and he finally realized what had happened. The insect clan couldn't have killed their way to the base so quickly. Under normal circumstances, insect tides would spread out with the insect valley as the center. For the insect clan without intelligence, their actions didn't have a clear goal, and they would devour all the vitality and energy they encountered along the way. However, what if someone had purposely led them here? Traitors of the Jade Blood sect. Ching Bo's anger was suppressed in his chest, and he had nowhere to vent it. It was a terrible feeling. Even if the people of the Jade Blood sect really came to attack their base, Ching Bo wouldn't be so angry. Since they were from different factions, it was natural for them to fight each other. However, what did the traitors of the Jade Blood sect do? First, they ambushed at the entrance of the wormhole, causing the hundreds of disciples led by Guardian Humane to be wiped out. Then, they turned around and led the insect tide to their base. Was this something a human would do? Ever since Ching Bo started cultivating, he had never met such a vicious person. This person's internal organs were probably all black. "Senior brother, what should we do?" The cultivators of the Heavenly Fiend Temple panicked. The people who had attacked the array had already left, but the insect clan hadn't. They were now outside the array, devouring the spiritual power flowing through the array. To the insect clan, the surge of spiritual power in the protective array was extremely attractive. There was no need to worry at the moment because there weren't many insect clan members. However, just by looking at the endless line, they knew that as time passed, more and more insect clan members would come. Guardians, fully activate the power of the protective array. Everyone else, follow me to kill the enemy. Ching Bo immediately gave the order. The protective array would always be activated because the spiritual power in the spiritual stream battlefield was very dense. Therefore, most arrays set up in bases could absorb the spiritual power of heaven and earth to maintain their operation. There was no need for additional consumption. A better protective array could even store excess spiritual power for later use. Under normal circumstances, the protective array would only be maintained at the lowest level of consumption. It would only be fully activated when there was an attack, and at that time, some spiritual stones would be consumed. Many sects had more than one protective array in their bases. Wealthy sects would set up several protective arrays that were linked together. In this way, if one array was broken, another array would be activated. However, sects in the outer circle usually only had one array. That was because an array that could cover an entire base was very expensive. The sects in the outer circle did not have that much wealth. Moreover, it was useless to set up more arrays. The cultivators in the outer circle were generally weaker. It was very rare for a sect's base to be broken through. The reason why the Xian sect's attack on Jiuxing sect's base had caused a huge uproar was because such an incident was rare. At this moment, the Heavenly Fiend Temple's base was facing an unprecedented crisis. The ones attacking the base were not cultivators, but a swarm of insect clan members. This was something that had never happened before. Even if there were only 100 or so cultivators left, Tringbo could not abandon the base. This was his responsibility as the vice guardian. He could lose his life, but he could not lose the base. After a clear and precise order was given, the protective array's power was activated. Just as Tringbo was about to lead the remaining disciples to kill the enemy, a chaotic wave of spiritual energy suddenly came from behind the base. Tringbo was shocked. He hurriedly ordered the disciples to kill the enemy while he led a few people to investigate. Not long after, the Heavenly Fiend Temple's cultivators, led by Tringbo, looked in front of them with fear. Outside the protective array, there were densely packed figures. They did not know where they came from. Those people were using spells and spiritual weapons to attack the protective array, causing ripples to appear on the array's light screen. There was a swarm of insect clan members in front of them and hundreds of cultivators attacking from behind. Tringbo only felt darkness in front of him and almost fainted on the ground. His body swayed and was supported by a junior brother beside him. He waved his hand and shouted angrily, "Lu Ye, get out here!" Although he did not know any of the cultivators here, he was certain that these people were from the Jade Blood sect. The swarm of insect clan members had just been lured over and hundreds of cultivators had already begun to attack. Who would believe that this was not premeditated? It was only now that he understood that he had underestimated the ruthlessness of the Jade Blood sect. Hundreds of his own cultivators had been trapped in the wormhole, causing them to be completely annihilated. However, the Jade Blood sect was not satisfied. They wanted to attack and occupy the base because attacking and occupying a base was an irresistible temptation for any sect. Tringbo was clearly aware of this. If he had to deal with the Insect Clan or the Jade Blood sect's attack alone, he might have been able to think of a way, but being attacked from both sides like this, no one could stand it. There was darkness in front of him and his future was dark. Jade Blood sect, aren't you afraid of being struck by lightning by the heavens for kicking us when we're down? A Heavenly Fiend Temple cultivator roared in grief and indignation. Immediately, a cultivator from the Jade Blood sect responded, "Why didn't you say something about being struck by lightning when you bullied us in the past? Brat, just stand there obediently. Once the array is broken, I'll give you a quick death." Chapter 224. Half an hour later, with the collapse of the Heavenly Fiend Temple's protective array, hundreds of cultivators from the Blue Blood sect charged straight into the Heavenly Fiend Temple's encampment. Most of the cultivators were dumbfounded. Before this, they had never thought that it would be so easy to capture a sect's encampment. After all, this was a sect from the outer circle, and it would usually take several years for their encampment to be captured. However, it had only been half an hour since they arrived, and the Heavenly Fiend Temple's encampment had already been breached. Inside the encampment, the remaining 100 cultivators of the Heavenly Fiend Temple had already retreated to the 9 states under Tringbo's leadership. Even if he knew that his future was hopeless, he did not dare to stay and wait for death. Words like "you can lose your life, but you can't lose your encampment" were things that could be shouted during normal times, but when it came to the line between life and death, they naturally had to protect themselves. There was only hope if they were alive, and if they died, there would be nothing left. There was no one left in the Heavenly Fiend Temple's encampment, so now there were only the cultivators of the Blue Blood sect and the swarm of insects. According to Lu Ye's plan, the cultivators above the Third Order Origin Realm swept across the square of the Heavenly Secret Temple and faced the insect tide under the leadership of Chen Yu and the others. The cultivators below the Third Order Origin Realm spread out and went to various places to plunder the Heavenly Fiend Temple's encampment. Lu Yi and Hua Xi rushed directly into the Heavenly Secret Temple. Hua Xi raised her hand and pressed it on the Heavenly Secret Pillar, using her authority as the vice envoy to plunder the various blessings on the pillar. Lu Yi was responsible for protecting her. He had specifically consulted Li Baxian before and knew that plundering blessings would take some time, so he did not let Hua Si come alone. Hua Si closed her eyes and performed the task. Lu Yi walked to a wide chair and sat down, then threw a spirit pill into his mouth and chewed on it. Then, he raised his hand and tapped on his battlefield imprint, searching for something. There were now many imprints in his battlefield imprint, all of which belonged to the vice-envoys or defenders of the various great forces in the Chess Sea. Among them, the encampments of several forces were not far from the Blue Blood sect. Among them was the Everlasting Pavilion, which was only separated from the Blue Blood sect's encampment by the Feng families. The Feng clan was to the east of the Jade Blood sect, while the Everlasting Veranda was to the east of the Feng clan. It could be said that the Feng clan was sandwiched between the two sections. While Lu Yi was in the Chess Sea, the refined guardian of the Everlasting Pavilion, Ding Yushu, had sought him out to discuss the matter. In the future, when they had the time, they would work together to fight the Feng clan. However, at that time, there were not many people in the entire Jade Blood sect, so Lu Yi had not been able to give a clear answer. This was a good opportunity. The attack on the Heaven Fiend Hall's encampment was unexpectedly smooth. Since things had already progressed to this stage, they might as well go all the way and attack the Feng clan as well. Now that his cultivation had risen, it wouldn't be long before he had to enter the inner circle of the battlefield to gain experience. If he could defeat Feng Shi before he left, Blue Blood sect's situation would undoubtedly be much better, and he would be able to leave with peace of mind. However, this would depend on the intentions of the Everlasting Pavilion. Although the Feng family was only at the 9th rank, it would not be so easy for them to take down the encampment of this faction. The reason why the Heaven Evil Temple was unable to resist was because too many people had died in the wormhole. The Feng family had never encountered such a crisis. Therefore, if they wanted to attack Feng Shi, the Everlasting Pavilion would have to put in a lot of effort. If they could not do anything, this plan would have to be aborted. After finding Ding Yushu's brand, Lu Yi sent a message. "Brother Ding, how's the situation on your side?" He soon received a reply. "It's stable. We've already killed our way into the worm nest. It won't be long before we're completely done with it. Brother Yi, do you need help? I can send some people over." "That's not necessary. I just have a business deal to discuss with you." "Business?" Ding Yushu was puzzled. They were currently dealing with the worm tide, so why did he suddenly want to talk about business? After a moment, Lu Yi ended the message with Ding Yushu, and a thoughtful look appeared in his eyes. At the edge of the encampment, many cultivators led by Chen Yu were forming a line of defense against the worm tide that was surging over. The scale of the worm tide was not too large, so even if there were many human-sized worms, Blue Blood sect could still deal with them. However, it would not be able to last for a long time. The worm tide was endless and could not be killed in a short period of time. "It's done," Hua Si's voice sounded. Judging from her expression, it was obvious that she had gained a lot. After all, Heaven Fiend Temple was an 8th-grade force and had been established for decades. After so many years, there were many blessings on the Divine Pillar. It could be seen from the richness of the heaven and earth spirit chi here that it was denser than Blue Blood sects. After all, it was the accumulation of a sect for decades. Lu Yi and Hua Si's gains from guarding Spirit Creek alone could not make up for it. There would be a lot of losses in the process of plundering blessings. Even so, Blue Blood sect had gained a lot this time. Lu Yi stepped forward and spoke to Hua Si. Hua Si's eyelids twitched. Is that even possible? She had thought that it would be enough to destroy Heaven Fiend Temple, but she did not expect Lu Yi to target Feng family. "We'll know if it works or not when we try. There's no loss even if it doesn't work." He had said something similar when he had destroyed Heaven Fiend Temple before, but he had caused them to suffer. Hua Si could not help but observe a moment of silence for Feng family. Being neighbors with the Blue Blood sect, these two forces from Myriad Devil Ridge were really lucky. Whistling sounds could be heard as the scattered cultivators quickly gathered. Lu Yi, Chen Yu, and the others with higher cultivations brought up the rear, while the others quickly left under Hua Xi's lead. A moment later, Chen Yu and the others also retreated, leaving Lu Yi to fight alone. Looking down from the sky, he could see countless insects swarming towards him from all directions, almost drowning him out. Fiery red light from the Imperial equipment constantly shuttled back and forth in the surroundings. Fire dragons constantly danced in the air, and saber lights flashed from the mountain coiling saber. While cutting down the insects, they attracted the attention of the insect. At a certain moment, fiery red wings spread open and Lu Yi soared into the sky, flapping his wings as he flew away. Several dozen meters away, he landed, and Hu Po, who had been waiting for him, immediately caught him. Lu Yi turned around and shot out a fire dragon spell. Attracted by the violent spiritual energy fluctuations, a dense swarm of insectoids chased after him. Hu Po flew in the direction Lu Yi had pointed out. On the tiger's back, Lu Yi took out a bottle of resting fruit wine and drank it, quickly recovering the spiritual energy he had used up. Looking in the direction Lu Yi had fled in, Chen Yu was confused. He's not going back to the base? That direction was not towards Blue Blood Sect's base. Hua Xi said, he's not going back for now. Follow me. Saying this, she mounted her mechanical wolf and led the several hundred cultivators away. At the same time, in a certain insect nest, the cultivators of Everlasting Pavilion suddenly intensified their attacks under Ding Yushu's orders. The insects, who were no match for them, immediately suffered countless casualties. 2 hours later, the meat pouch at the center of the insect nest was broken open, and Ding Yushu took out a few life cores. Chapter 225. The core flesh sac was broken, and the life core was taken out. The insect nest soon began to wither. The wounded clean up the battlefield. The rest follow me. Ding Yushu called out and led more than 400 cultivators out of the tunnel. After exiting the wormhole, the cultivators immediately rushed in another direction. Halfway through, someone realized that something was wrong because they were not going back to the station. Instead, they seemed to be going to the Feng family. Someone immediately asked excitedly, "Senior Brother Ding, are we going to fight the Feng family?" Fight the Feng family? That's great. I've been unhappy with those bastards for a long time. Last time, Senior Brother Zhang and I fought with a team from the Feng family and killed one of their people. That little girl from the Feng family is quite pretty. If we can catch her to warm Senior Brother Ding's bed, Junior Brother, your smile is so wretched. Also, don't ruin Senior Brother Ding's reputation. It's not like you don't know what kind of person that little girl from the Feng family is. How can she be qualified to warm Senior Brother Ding's bed? Then warm my bed. I don't mind. What are you talking about? Senior Brother Ding, are we really going to fight the Feng family? The cultivators of the Everlasting Pavilion had just fought a battle with the insect tide, and they were all exhausted. However, when they heard that they were going to fight the Feng family, they suddenly became energetic. Obviously, the cultivators of the Everlasting Pavilion and the Feng family often had conflicts. In the Spirit Stream battlefield, every sex station would be adjacent to 2 or 3 other sex stations. One of them must be from the same camp, because if they were surrounded by the enemy stations, the cultivators in the station might not even be able to leave. They were doomed to have no prospects for development. Lu Yi had a map in his hand, which marked the situation of each sex station. He had observed it and found that if the stations of the 2 camps were connected, they would be like 2 big dragons strangling each other in the Spirit Stream battlefield. Among the 3 neighboring forces of the Feng family, except for the Myriad Devil Ridge, the other 2 were the Jade Blood Sect and the Everlasting Pavilion. The Jade Blood Sect's previous situation was there, so the Feng family did not need to pay attention to it at all. Therefore, they could use all their energy to deal with the Everlasting Pavilion. The Everlasting Pavilion did not have such conditions. They did not only have to deal with the Feng clan, but also another sect from the Myriad Devil Ridge. It was fine if they had small conflicts with the Feng clan, but once they had a large-scale conflict with the Feng clan, the other sect from the myriad Devil Ridge would definitely intervene, making the everlasting pavilion extremely uncomfortable. The enmity between the two sides had accumulated over a long period of time. Naturally, they hated each other. "Shut up!" Ding Yushu shouted from the front. He did not reveal the true purpose of this operation. On one hand, it was to keep it a secret. With so many people around, it was hard to say how it would be leaked. On the other hand, it was because he was not completely confident. Although Lu Yi had told him that the success rate was very high, there were always accidents. It could be seen that Ding Yushu had a very high prestige in the everlasting pavilion. After he spoke, the cultivators immediately fell silent and silently threw spirit pills into their mouths to recover. As old neighbors who had lived together for many years, Everlasting Veranda naturally knew where the Feng family's wormhole was. Ding Yushu led a group of people straight to the wormhole with great momentum. The Feng family's cultivators who stayed behind immediately noticed and hid in the wormhole while sending messages. After a short while, more than 400 cultivators from the everlasting pavilion surrounded the entrance of the wormhole, glaring at the bottom. Feng Lianju, the Feng family's deputy guardian, who was leading the cultivators of the clan to fight against the insect tide, received the news immediately. He only snorted lightly and ignored them. Although it seemed dangerous to have the wormhole's entrance blocked, it was actually not a big problem. As long as they did not show themselves easily, the everlasting veranda could not do anything to them. The everlasting veranda did not dare to rush down rashly unless they wanted to die. The everlasting veranda could not block the entrance for a long time. If they really did so, the everlasting veranda's encampment would be lost. The Feng family could join forces with another force from the myriad Devil Ridge to attack the everlasting veranda's encampment. Therefore, Feng Lianju did not panic at all. This news was also immediately sent to the Feng family's encampment. The Feng family's encampment's guardian was a female cultivator called Feng Yu. When she heard that the everlasting veranda had sent out 400 cultivators to block the wormhole's entrance, she was stunned for a long time. Although she was surprised by the everlasting veranda's speed in dealing with the insect tide, she could not figure out the meaning behind it. However, just to be safe, she still sent out a message. Soon, she received a reply. "Little sister Yu, what's the matter?" The other party's name was very intimate. Feng Yu could almost imagine the other party's ugly face. This made her feel disgusted, but she naturally would not show it so easily. She told the other party about the everlasting veranda's actions. The other party was very arrogant. "They really have guts. I haven't taught that brat Ding Yushu a lesson for a month. That dog is going to turn the sky upside down. Little sister Yu, don't worry. Once I'm done dealing with the insect tide, I'll bring people to kill them all." Feng Yu quickly replied, "That's not necessary. I'm just telling Senior Marshal Brother about this matter. The Feng family can take care of things here." She wasn't going to ask the other party to do anything. Otherwise, this ugly guy would definitely make some rude demands. If there were any casualties in the conflict with the everlasting veranda, the Feng family might have to compensate with spirit stones again. However, with the everlasting veranda's actions, this was the best time to attack the everlasting veranda's encampment. With the other party's personality, how could they let this opportunity slip by? Throughout the whole process, she had only provided some information to the other party. It was very normal for the cultivators of the two camps to communicate. Therefore, no matter how things developed, it had nothing to do with her. How interesting. Feng Yu picked up the cup on the side and took a sip. Boom! A loud sound came. Feng Yu was startled and choked on the water again. She coughed violently for a while before recovering. A cultivator from the Feng family hurried in. "Who is it?" Feng Yu's expression was gloomy. Although she did not see what happened just now, the sound just now was obviously the result of her family's encampment's defensive array being attacked. This made her very angry. At this time, someone actually dared to attack the Feng family's encampment? The person who came looked terrified. An insectide. What insectide? Feng Yu frowned. When she asked, she vaguely heard some strange sounds and rustling sounds. Her expression changed and she quickly rushed out, rushing to the edge of the encampment. When she looked up, her beautiful face turned pale. She saw all kinds of insects crawling on the light curtain of the defensive array. These insects were not small, and there were many with long bodies. They crawled on the light curtain and wriggled their mouths, gnawing at the flowing spirit force. The light curtain became much weaker after being gnawed by the insects. Some insects even spat out green liquid from their mouth. When the green liquid fell on the light curtain, it made a sizzling sound and corroded the spirit force. Looking at the overwhelming number of insects, Feng Yu felt a chill all over her body. Whose insect tide had broken out? This scale was not something the cultivators in the outer circle could deal with. The first thing she thought of was the everlasting veranda, but it was unlikely. If it was really the everlasting veranda's insect tide, then the everlasting veranda must be very busy. How could there be hundreds of cultivators betting on their own wormhole? If it was not the everlasting veranda, could it be the Jade Blood sect? But didn't the Jade Blood sect recruit more than 100 registered disciples and a few hundred rogue cultivators? Even if there were losses in dealing with the insect tide, it was impossible for the insect tide to break out to this extent. Moreover, even if the insect tide broke out on the Jade Blood sect's side, it would not have reached here so quickly. The insects would first gnaw on the vitality along the way until there was not even a blade of grass left. Only then would they push out layer by layer, so their initial speed was not fast. Senior apprentice Sister Feng. Someone shouted from the side. Feng Yu immediately came back to her senses. At this time, it was useless to think about where this insect tide had come from. No matter where it came from, this insect tide had already reached their doorstep. If they did not deal with it properly, their encampment would be finished. Quick, activate the defensive array with all your strength. Feng Yu's clear voice sounded. Soon, the Feng family's cultivators rushed to the base of the array and threw in a large number of spirit stones. The spirit force they had accumulated in the past was also released to strengthen the defensive power of the array. 3 miles behind the Feng clan's encampment, 700 cultivators of the Jade Blood sect were quietly lying in wait at the bottom of a slope. In the past, with so many people gathered here, they would have been quickly discovered, but now that the large sects were dealing with the insect tide, a large number of cultivators had gone underground, and a small number had stayed behind to guard the encampment. There was basically no one in the wild, which was why the Jade Blood sect's cultivators could safely hide here without being discovered. Fifth senior apprentice brother, when are we going? Someone asked. After tasting the sweetness of attacking and occupying someone else's encampment, everyone could not wait to do it a second time. No rush. Lu Yi responded while sending a message to Ding Yushu. He learned that they were already in position and that the Everlasting Pavilion's deputy guardian had already set off and was on the way. He then raised his head and looked at the Feng clan's encampment. Seeing that their defensive array was as stable as before, he could not help but mutter in his heart. The reason why Lu Yi did not immediately take action was because he wanted to wait for the Everlasting Pavilion's deputy guardian to arrive. Secondly, Lu Yi wanted to kill more cultivators of the Feng clan. Although attacking and occupying someone else's encampment would cause them to suffer huge losses, wouldn't it be perfect if he could kill their cultivators on top of that? According to fourth senior apprentice brother, the insect race had a very powerful characteristic, which was to break through arrays. The insect race's gnawing was very destructive to this kind of light curtain-shaped defensive array. If he rushed out now, the Feng clan's response would definitely be the same as the Heaven Fiend temples. The cultivators left behind would retreat to the 9 provinces and leave their encampment behind. Therefore, Lu Yi wanted to wait for the insect race to destroy their defensive array before making his move. At that time, as long as he blocked the Tianji Hall, none of the Feng clan's cultivators left behind in the encampment would be able to escape. Previously, it was a loss to let the Heaven Fiend Temple's deputy guardian escape, because an encampment had a lot of production. The deputy guardian's storage bag must have a lot of good things. This time, he could not let the Feng clan's deputy guardian escape. Attacking and occupying an encampment was a matter of practice. Lu Yi was also slowly summing up his experience and choosing the most advantageous method for his side. Chapter 226. The Feng family's encampment was in chaos as the defensive array's power was pushed to the limit. More and more insects rushed over and crawled on the light screen, gnawing on the spiritual power flowing in the light screen. Looking out from the encampment, the insectoids had almost covered the entire field of vision. Many of them had even climbed into the air. The Feng family had invested a large number of spirit stones and released all of their accumulated spirit power, but they could only barely maintain the power of the formation. However, the scale of the insect tide was getting bigger and bigger. At this rate, the array would definitely be broken in a few hours. Feng Yu's face was pale. Only then did she realize a problem. The everlasting pavilion had just blocked the entrance of their wormhole, and the encampment was attacked by the insect tide, causing hundreds of cultivators to be stranded outside. Was this a coincidence? Or did someone plan all of this? If it was a coincidence, then it was fine. However, if someone had planned all of this in secret, then it was too terrifying. On the other side, Feng Lianju, who received the message in the Feng family's insect nest, also panicked. If there were no people from the everlasting pavilion, they could still return to the encampment. However, with the everlasting pavilion blocking the entrance, how could they dare to come out? Moreover, the insect tide on their side had not been dealt with yet. They were anxious, but there was nothing they could do. Time slowly passed. 6 hours later, the light screen of the Feng family's encampment's protective array was extremely dim and could be broken at any time. Once the array was broken, the insect tide would be able to invade. With the scale of the insect tide, the Feng family's 100 or so cultivators would not be able to stop it. Feng Yu's body turned icy cold. She had never imagined that her family's encampment would be breached in such a manner. Thankfully, it was only the insect horde and not the cultivators. If the cultivators had breached their encampment, the Feng clan would have suffered a great loss. Just as she was thinking about this, a rumbling sound suddenly came from behind the encampment. Then, extremely chaotic spiritual power fluctuations came from there. The Feng family's cultivators were already panicking. They were just waiting for Feng Yu to give the order to withdraw from the 9 states when such a sudden change occurred. No one knew what was going on over there, but soon, a Feng family's cultivator rushed over and shouted, "There are hundreds of cultivators attacking the array." Feng Yu felt her vision go dark and she almost fell to the ground. There were hundreds of cultivators attacking the encampment at this juncture? Which force? It's over, it's all over. Earlier, she was still glad that the station was only attacked by the bug horde, but now it seemed that things were not as simple as she thought. With a loud boom, the formation shattered, and the insectoids that were pressing against the protective formation in front of the encampment fell to the ground. More insectoids poured into the encampment, and the sounds of them crawling could be heard. Quickly returned to the 9 regions. Feng Yu was practically gritting her teeth as she issued this order. After she finished speaking, she hurriedly ran towards Tianji Hall. At this moment, many of the Feng family's cultivators, who saw that the situation was not good, rushed towards the Heavenly Secret Hall. One figure after another rushed into the Heavenly Secret Hall, using the Heavenly Secret Pillars to retreat to the 9 regions. However, only a few were quick to react. Most of the cultivators did not have time to react. By the time they arrived at the square in front of the Tianji Hall, hundreds of cultivators were rushing towards them from the front. Each of them was filled with killing intent. The leader of the group was riding on a huge snow-white tiger. With a swing of the long blade in his hand, a cultivator from the Feng clan was beheaded. There was also a fiery red stream of light flying beside this person. At a glance, it was obvious that it was the light of an imperial artifact. It was a young man that Feng Yu had never seen before. The spirit light on this young man's body showed that he was a seventh-order cultivator. However, the purity of the spirit light was something that Feng Yu had never seen before. Even when she saw the Cloud River Realm cultivators in the sect, she had never seen such a pure spirit light. She saw with her own eyes how this young man slaughtered everyone. A sixth-order cultivator from the Feng family could not even block a single strike from him. The young man also noticed her. When their eyes met, the young man's eyes lit up, as if he had seen something pleasant. He directly flew over from the tiger's back, and a bright blade light flashed in front of Feng Yu. This blade did not kill Feng Yu, not because she had the ability to block it, but because when Lu Yi rushed towards her, this woman actually lowered her body, bent her legs, and knelt on the ground. At the same time, she shrunk her neck like a turtle. Lu Yi had calculated everything, but he did not expect the other party to respond in such a way. The mountain coiling saber cut through the other party's head, cutting off a few strands of hair. Since entering the Spirit Stream battlefield, many cultivators had died under Lu Ye's saber. Some lost their lives before they could react, some fought to the death, and some begged for mercy before they died. However, there were not many of them. Generally speaking, when two sides from opposing camps fought, if one side was not the other's opponent, there was basically no way to survive, because begging for mercy was useless. However, this woman was the first one who had knelt on the ground so directly. This woman was also a seventh-order cultivator, which was why Lu Ye's eyes lit up when he saw her. A seventh-order cultivator, this woman was either the Feng family's protector or vice-protector. Since she was guarding the station, all the good things must be on her. As long as he killed her, they would all be his. However, this woman's reaction stunned Lu Yi, and he even forgot to change his attack. Landing on the ground, Lu Yi lowered her head to look at the woman kneeling in front of her. Her face was as pale as a sheet of paper. Her head was on the ground, and her hands were stretched out. Because of this action, her close-fitting clothes outlined her enchanting figure. Lu Yi raised his saber and was about to cut down. Although he was stunned just now, the other party was a seventh-order cultivator from the Feng family, so he naturally would not show mercy. Putting on such a defenseless appearance would only make it easier for him to cut off the other party's head. "I am a medical cultivator. Fellow Taoist, please spare my life." Lu Ye's raised saber paused, and he frowned. There was an unwritten rule in the Spirit Stream battlefield, and that was, if both sides could avoid killing each other, they would try their best to keep the other party's medical cultivator alive. In the past, Lu Yi did not know about this, but now that he was the guardian envoy of the Blue Blood Sect Station, he had a lot of contact with Shui Yuan and the others and learned a lot of common sense on the battlefield. Shui Yuan had even specifically told him about this, probably because she saw that her junior brother's murderous intent was quite heavy. The reason for this rule was that there were very few medical cultivators, and the second reason was that most medical cultivators were not good at injuring others. Even if they were Dao cultivators or other factions, most of them did it for self-protection. Medical cultivators were more often used to save people and heal injuries. When compared to cultivators of the same level, medical cultivators would always be at the bottom. Third, keeping the enemy's medical cultivators alive would allow them to heal their own injured cultivators. Back in Evil Moon Valley, when Pang Dehai was teaching Lu Yi and Yu Shaodai the division of factions, he had also told Yu Shaodai that as a medical cultivator, even if they were captured by the people of Myriad Demon Ridge, they did not have to worry about being killed. The two camps had been fighting for so many years, and although they could not wait to grind each other to the ground, this unwritten rule had always been maintained. This was also to avoid a decrease in the number of medical cultivators on both sides. Medical cultivators were rare, and if too many of them died, it would be troublesome to find someone to heal them in the future. Lu Yi finally understood why this woman had knelt down without a word. It turned out that she had the identity of a medical cultivator. The long saber in his hand slashed down, accompanied by Feng Yu's cry of surprise. A bone-deep wound appeared on her arm, and blood flowed out, dyeing her clothes red. "Prove it to me." Feng Yu quickly straightened her upper body, endured the piercing pain, and raised her other hand to cover the wound on her arm. Spirit power as soft as water began to surge. Lu Yi could not help but click his tongue. She really was a medical cultivator. Chen Yu, who was leading a large group of Blue Blood sect disciples to resist the insect tide, jumped back when he heard this. "Here. Watch this woman. If there is anything unusual, kill her." Chen Yu looked down at Feng Yu and said, "Yes." Lu Yi rushed forward, but after running 2 steps, he turned back and said, "By the way, take the storage bag from her. Also, ask if she has anything valuable here." "Understood." After Lu Yi left, Chen Yu looked at the kneeling Feng Yu and said, "Get up, you should have heard what I said just now. Give me the storage bag." Feng Yu accepted her fate and took off the storage bag and handed it to Chen Yu, but she did not get up. Instead, she raised her head and looked at Chen Yu with a pitiful expression. "My body is a little weak, can you help me up?" Saying this, she reached out a hand to Chen Yu. The feeling of escaping from death was too terrifying. The methods she used to deal with men were completely useless in front of this young man. The way he looked at her was not like how one would look at a woman. Looking at the soft and delicate hand, Chen Yu's heart surged for a moment, but after looking up at Lu Yi, who was killing insects, he decisively shook his head. "No, get up yourself." Feng Yu's expression was very bitter as she slowly got up. Chen Yu sternly said, "I'm warning you, don't play any tricks. Take me to find the valuable things here, hurry up." Saying this, he pushed the dilly-dallying Feng Yu. Feng Yu moaned, and Chen Yu felt like his bones were going to melt. The encampment had been conquered, she had been captured, and now he had to take her to find something valuable. Feng Yu was bitter, but at least she had kept her life. In the divine secret palace, Hua Si withdrew her hand and said to Chao Huahong, "Senior brother Chao, please." Chao Huahong laughed. "Then I won't hold back." Saying this, he placed his hand on the divine secret pillar and plundered the remaining blessings to his heart's content. He was the deputy guardian of the everlasting pavilion. Previously, Lu Yi had asked Ding Yushu to lead people to block the Feng clan's wormhole so that hundreds of Feng clan members could not return to the encampment. After taking down the Feng clan's encampment, they would split the blessings of the divine secret pillar equally. Since they had worked together, the Jade Blood sect naturally could not take all the benefits for themselves. While the cultivators of the Jade Blood sect were waiting, Chao Huahong rushed over to meet up with Lu Yi and the others. Now, he had only made a trip, and he had gained a lot of benefit. This kind of thing was hard to come by. He thought to himself, no wonder senior brother Ding praised these 2 people from the Jade Blood sect so much. He had also heard about what had happened in the Chess Sea. The reason Haotian Alliance could turn defeat into victory was all because of the advantages these 2 people from the Jade Blood sect had accumulated in the early stages. Now that they had gained so many benefits from this place, it seemed that he had to get closer to the Jade Blood sect in the future. Chapter 227. After Hua Si and Chao Huahong divided up the blessings on the Feng clan's Tianji pillar, the hundreds of cultivators began to retreat in an orderly manner. As usual, Lu Yi brought up the rear alone. He used the fire dragon technique to attract the attention of the insect clan with the help of the violent spirit energy. Soon, the place he was at was completely surrounded. If he didn't have the flying wing tattoo, he would never dare to do this. Before a cultivator could fly, they would be surrounded by such a large number of insects. No matter how strong they were, it would be difficult for them to display their strength. They would die sooner or later. However, it was different with the flying wing tattoo. If he couldn't win, he could fly. He thanked Madame Yun and the sect master. This tattoo had helped him a lot. When the hundreds of cultivators of the Jade Blood sect had retreated to a safe distance, Lu Yi soared into the sky, turned into a red light, and quickly disappeared. The insect clan chased for a while and lost their target. They slowly stopped and began to act according to their instincts. The Heaven Fiend Hall's encampment in the north was destroyed. Countless cultivators were killed and injured. The Feng clan's encampment in the east was destroyed. Although not many people died, the losses were not small. The two neighbors of the Jade Blood sect could be said to have suffered greatly. Lu Yi didn't plan to lead the insect clan anywhere for the time being. The Jade Blood sect had been busy fighting, and the cultivators were very tired. He wanted to take a break first. Moreover, calculating the time, the large sects had almost finished dealing with the insect clan. At this time, even if the insect clan was led to the territory of the myriad Devil Ridge, it would be difficult to have the same effect as before. What he needed to deal with now was the Feng clan. Although the Feng clan's encampment had been captured, not many people had died. How could this be? They were all neighbors of the Jade Blood sect. The Heaven Fiend Hall was already in such a state. The Jade Blood sect couldn't favor one and discriminate against the other. Otherwise, it would be unfair to the Heaven Fiend Hall. Ding Yushu was still leading his own cultivators to block the entrance. What the Jade Blood sect needed to do now was to meet with the people of the Everlasting Pavilion. Then, they would close the door and beat the dogs. They would strive to get rid of the Feng clan in one step. In this way, the Jade Blood sect would be able to dominate the area within a radius of 100 miles in the future. He flew in the direction where everyone had retreated and soon met up with the group. Fellow Lu. Chao Huahong cupped his fists with a smile. He was in a good mood, the air around him. How's the situation over there? Chao Huahong informed them of the situation at the wormhole. The people from the Feng Consortium were in despair. They had already heard the news that their base had been breached, but they were still confused as to which faction had taken over their base. Things happened too suddenly. After the defensive formation was broken, the cultivators of the Feng clan who stayed behind were either quickly killed or returned to 9 regions with the help of the Pillar of Divine Design. They had no time to identify the enemy. Feng Yu, the only one who had been captured, had come to her senses. Through the snow-white tiger, she had deduced Lu Ye's identity, but how could she dare to send out a message? Chen Yu and Kong Nyo stared at her from left and right. If she made any rash moves, they would cut her down with their swords and sabers. Mixed in with the hundreds of people from Blue Blood sect, even if Feng Yu was a 7th-order cultivator, she still felt like a sheep in a pack of wolves, helpless and weak. Under Feng Lianzhu's lead, the hundreds of cultivators trapped inside the wormhole had attempted to break through several times. In the end, however, the cultivators from the Everlasting Veranda beat them back, resulting in a high number of casualties. Right now, the two sides were in a stalemate. One side couldn't break through, while the other didn't dare to rashly enter. The situation was deadlocked. Hearing this, Lu Yi couldn't help but frown. This situation was really difficult to break out of. It seemed that he had to think of a way. A unique fragrance drifted into his nostrils. Lu Yi didn't need to turn his head to know that it was Hua Si riding her mechanical wolf. "How's the harvest?" "Not bad." Hua Si nodded and said, "Your harvest isn't small either." Didn't you snatch the chief's wife? I heard that she's the Feng Consortium's guardian." Hua Si pouted. "How was it a chief's wife?" Lu Yi was about to refute when his eyes suddenly lit up. He quickly took a few steps forward and came to Feng Yu's side. He whispered a few words to her. Feng Yu nodded first, then shook her head with a terrified expression. Lu Yi pulled out his saber with murderous intent. Feng Yu shook her head vigorously with tears in her eyes. She looked very pitiful. She pulled out the mountain-coiling saber and a fiery red spirit force wrapped around it. Feng Yu stood still and closed her eyes. After waiting for a moment, she didn't feel like she was being cut. When she opened her eyes again, Lu Yi was no longer beside her. She let out a long sigh of relief. After escaping death, her legs went soft again. Not far behind her, Lu Yi frowned. He originally wanted to use Feng Yu. Since she was the Feng Consortium's guardian, she definitely had a certain amount of prestige in the hearts of the Feng family cultivators. If she passed some false information to the Feng family cultivators in the wormhole, she might be able to trick them into coming up. At that time, the Jade Blood sect would only need to join forces with the Everlasting Veranda to wipe out the Feng family cultivators. Lu Yi thought that there was no problem with this matter because from Feng Yu's previous performance, this woman was a greedy person who was afraid of death. Who would have thought that Lu Yi would misjudge her? Although she knelt down and begged for mercy as soon as she saw Lu Yi, she showed great resistance when she was asked to deceive the cultivators of her family. It was as if she would rather die than cooperate. When it came to her own safety, she could use her identity as a medical cultivator to kneel down and beg for mercy to save her life. However, when it came to the Feng Consortium, she had her own principles and perseverance. Lu Yi couldn't really cut her down. Moving forward, they soon arrived at the Feng Consortium's wormhole. The cultivators of the two families gathered. The number of people exceeded 1,000. Lu Yi and Ding Yushu stood together at the entrance of the wormhole and looked down. Ding Yushu told him about the current situation, which was basically similar to what Chao Huahong had said. The current situation is like this. Does Brother Yi have any good ideas? I'll go down and take a look. As he said this, he leaped down to the ground. Ding Yushu's eyes almost popped out. Just how daring was this, looking down? He saw the light of spiritual power flickering below and violent spiritual power fluctuations spreading out. Then, Lu Ye's figure soared into the sky and landed lightly. He didn't suffer any injuries, just a little embarrassed. Although it was just a glimpse, Lu Yi still saw many Feng family cultivators squatting near the entrance. Whoever went down would die. If he didn't have the defensive spirit rune, he wouldn't have dared to act so rashly. Is there any way to make the underground passageway collapse? If this could be done, then many people from the Feng family would be buried alive. Ding Yushu shook his head and said, I've thought about it, but with our strength we can't do this. The underground passageway is too deep. He sighed and said, if it's really not possible, we can only give up. We can't keep wasting time here. There will definitely be powerful cultivators from the Feng family coming from the inner or core circles. If they have enough merits, they might have already used the divine pillar to teleport back to their own base. Of course, the probability of this happening is not high. Merits were hard to come by. Cultivators had many things to spend them on, and ordinary people couldn't accumulate too many merit. How could Lu Yi not know this? The divine pillar itself had the ability to teleport. Cultivators could use the divine pillar of the Alliance sect to teleport back to their own sect. Depending on the distance and cultivation level, the cost of teleportation varied. He hadn't tried it himself, but he knew that it would cost a lot of merit. The Heavenly Fiend Hall and the Feng family, which had been attacked by the Jade Blood sect, definitely had more than a few cultivators at the Spirit Stream realm. The powerful cultivators of the two sects were all training in the inner or core circles. When they heard that their base had been attacked, they would definitely return. It was very likely that they were already on their way back. If the Jade Blood sect and the Everlasting Veranda continued to stay here, it was most likely that they would wait for a group of powerful cultivators from the inner or core circles to come back. At that time, the situation would be disadvantageous to them. Not far away, Feng Yu listened attentively. She was secretly delighted. This was the right way to think. They should hurry up and leave. As long as the people from the Jade Blood sect and the Everlasting Veranda retreated, they would be in a good situation. Although the Feng family's base had been attacked, their casualties weren't too high. As long as they had people, they would be able to make a comeback. I'm a little unwilling. Lu Yi shook his head. Ding Yushu laughed. There's nothing we can do about it. Let me think about it. It wasn't easy to trap the people from the Feng family here. It would be a pity to let them go just like that. As he said this, he turned to look at Feng Yu. Feng Yu quickly lowered her head, looking like a little wife who had been bullied. This woman, why is she so stubborn? At this moment, Ding Yushu and Chao Huahong suddenly looked down at their own battlefield imprints. Their expressions were solemn. Chao Huahong shouted, "Senior brother." "Got it," Ding Yushu responded. He then looked at Lu Yi and said, "Brother Yi, the everlasting veranda's base has been attacked. We have to leave." Lu Yi was surprised. "Who attacked you?" "Ten Xiang's mountain." Lu Yi naturally had some research on the bases of the nearby forces. He only needed to think for a moment to know that Ten Xiang's mountain was a force of the Myriad Demon's Ridge that bordered the everlasting veranda. It was located to the north of the everlasting veranda. Why would Ten Xiang's mountain attack at this time? Lu Yi didn't finish his words before he suddenly reacted and glanced at Feng Yu. Ding Yushu also looked at Feng Yu coldly. Naturally, someone revealed our movements. He quickly gathered the cultivators of his sect and cupped his fists to Lu Yi. "If there's a chance next time, I'll cooperate with Brother Yi. No hurry, we'll go together. If we can't kill the people from the Feng family, we can kill the people from Ten Xiang's mountain." Ding Yushu was overjoyed. "That's great." Lu Yi rushed into the crowd and grabbed Feng Yu's collar. As she screamed in horror, he threw her onto Hu Po's back. After a dozen breaths, thousands of cultivators from both sides rushed in the direction of the everlasting veranda's base. The originally lively entrance of the wormhole suddenly quieted down. Riding on Hu Po's back, Feng Yu's tense mood finally relaxed. She didn't expect that her previous move would play a role in such a critical moment. Now that the people of the everlasting veranda and the Jade Blood sect had left, the people of the Feng family who were trapped in the wormhole were safe. With the help of Hu Po's bumpy ride, Feng Yu looked around and found that no one was paying attention to her. She quietly sent a message. "The everlasting veranda's base has been attacked by Ten Xiang's mountain. The cultivators of the two sects are rushing to the everlasting veranda. Run." She didn't notice that Lu Yi was also secretly sending a message to Ding Yushu. Chapter 228. After a while, Lu Yi nodded at Ding Yushu and suddenly stopped. The hundreds of cultivators from the everlasting pavilion left under Ding Yushu's lead, but the 700 cultivators from the Jade Blood sect stayed behind. On the tiger's back, Feng Yu quickly cut off her communication with Feng Lianju and looked around in shock. A large hand reached out and grabbed her neck, pulling her down from the tiger's back and throwing her to the ground. Feng Yu was covered in dust as she looked at Lu Yi, who was looking down at her in horror. "Many thanks. HM?" Feng Yu was stunned. "What are you thanking me for?" Lu Yi threw a spirit pill into his mouth and slowly chewed. "Did you inform your Feng family?" "I didn't." Feng Yu naturally wouldn't admit this, but when she met Lu Ye's playful gaze, she finally reacted. "You used me." Although her act of informing him was concealed, if someone had been observing, they would have noticed. She finally understood that Lu Yi didn't throw her on the tiger's back out of kindness, but to create an opportunity for her to inform him. It was laughable that she thought her submission had numbed the other party. If that was the case, then the message she sent to Feng Lianju was definitely a disaster. And everything just now was just a show to lure the snake out of its hole. The everlasting pavilion station wasn't attacked? Feng Yu's head was dizzy. Thinking back to Ding Yushu and Chao Huahong's expressions, it didn't seem to be fake. The everlasting pavilion station was indeed attacked, but compared to Ten Xiang's mountain, I'm more interested in the Feng family. Ding Yushu had already brought people back to help. A sex station was not so easy to take down. As long as the people from Ten Xiang's mountain hadn't lost their minds, they would definitely choose to retreat after seeing Ding Yushu. Therefore, it was the same whether the Jade Blood sect helped or not. Even with the Jade Blood sect's help, they could at most kill a few more people from Ten Xiang's mountain. As long as they couldn't break through the other party's station, they wouldn't be able to hurt them. The Feng family was different. Their station had already been breached. If the cultivators left in the wormhole suffered heavy casualties, their vitality would be greatly damaged. When Lu Yi first heard Ding Yushu say that the everlasting pavilion was under attack, he really did want to bring the Jade Blood sect to help, but he quickly realized that this might be an opportunity, so he decisively threw Feng Yu onto Hu Po's back. If this woman was honest enough and did not inform Lady Feng, then Blue Blood sect could only choose to follow Ding Yushu to reinforce Everlasting Pavilion's encampment. But if this woman wasn't honest enough, then Madame Feng's flaw would appear. In any case, no matter what, Blue Blood sect would not suffer a loss. Sure enough, Feng Yu had sent a message to the cultivators of the Feng clan. Lu Yi had already received confirmation from Yi, who he had left behind. At this moment, a few cultivators from the Feng clan were climbing out, preparing to investigate the situation around them. However, they did not expect that there was a pair of eyes watching them from the shadows, informing Lu Yi of their movements at all times. Clang, he unsheathed the Mount Pan saber and stabbed it down, nailing Feng Yu's hand to the ground. She cried out in pain as blood flowed out. Feng Yu looked at Lu Yi with teary eyes. She wanted to send another message. This is your only chance. If there's a next time, you'll die. Lu Yi pulled out the saber, causing Feng Yu to cry out in a low voice again. Qin Yu, look after her. If she dares to act rashly, kill her immediately. Yes. All of you follow me. Lu Yi turned around and led the 700 cultivators back in a mighty manner. At the exit of the wormhole, a few cultivators from the Feng clan climbed out in fear. They looked around and confirmed that the cultivators from the Grand Heaven Alliance who had gathered here before had retreated. Only then did they let out a sigh of relief. One of them came to the entrance of the wormhole and shouted to the people below, "There's no one here. Come up quickly." The cultivators from the Feng clan who had been stuck for half a day hurriedly climbed out of the wormhole one by one. In just a short while, hundreds of people had gathered outside the wormhole. Feng Lianju also climbed out and was trying to contact Feng Yu. However, all the messages he sent out were like stones sinking into the sea. There was no response. This made him feel uneasy. He did not know what had happened to Feng Yu. However, the most important thing now was to escape. Moreover, they had to rush back to reclaim the encampment. Without the encampment, this group of people was like a tree without roots and a source without water. Suddenly, a strong spirit energy fluctuation came. Feng Lianju raised his head and saw a fiery red stream of light rushing over from not far away. He only had time to see that the stream of light was a human figure before the person was already in front of him. The light from the Imperial equipment lit up and went straight for Feng Lianju's chest. Feng Lianju flicked the spear in his hand and sent the light flying. The powerful force made his hand go numb, and he took 2 steps back. Just as he steadied himself, Lu Ye's figure had already pounced from above. He unsheathed his mountain coiling saber and slashed at Feng Lianju. Feng Lianju blocked the sharp saber with his spear. The 2 spirit artifacts were in a deadlock. Their eyes met and Feng Lianju felt a huge pressure coming from the front. "Who are you?" He gritted his teeth and shouted. They were both in the 7th Order realm, but he found it hard to accept that there was such a big gap between their strength. What responded to him was a flash of brilliance from the mountain coiling saber. Feng Lianju's face changed drastically. He felt his body become incomparably heavy, as if a mountain was pressing down on his shoulders. There was already a gap in strength, so he was forced to kneel on the ground. Heavy pressure spirit rune. This spirit rune could produce a strange force field that made everything inside it heavy. The stream of light from the Imperial artifact flew from the back of Feng Lianju's head. Feng Lianju was being suppressed at the moment, so even if he sensed the danger, he was powerless to react. The stream of light broke through his spirit energy protection and pierced through the back of his head before flying out of his mouth. As Lu Yi leaped into the air, a few spells hit the spot where he was originally standing, and a few spirit weapons also came crashing down. In just one exchange, Feng Lianju, who was also in the 7th Order realm, died on the spot. This scene shocked many of the Feng family cultivators to the point that their hair stood on end. High in the sky, Lu Yi looked down and raised his hand slightly. The stream of light from the Imperial artifact shuttled back and forth as he used the fire dragon technique. At the same time, the 700 cultivators from the Blue Blood sect charged out from the direction he came from. The Feng family cultivators who had just crawled out were frightened and jumped into the wormhole one after another. However, the fire dragon was roaring and burning inside the wormhole, so jumping in did not bode well for them. The Feng family cultivators below, who had yet to crawl out, had no idea what was going on. At this moment, they gathered together and prepared to leave this place. Some retreated, some advanced, and the scene suddenly became chaotic. Suddenly, spirit energy fluctuations from a spirit technique surged from behind. Screams rang out as several Feng family cultivators died on the spot. It was Yi who had snuck in here and killed the enemy. The environment of this underground tunnel was too advantageous for her. After killing a few people, she could drill into the wall and the enemy would not be able to find her even if they wanted to. Moreover, Yi's current strength was not low. Ordinary cultivators would not be able to withstand a single spirit technique from her. Under such chaos, the situation near the entrance of the wormhole became even more chaotic. By the time the 700 cultivators from the Blue Blood sect arrived, there were more than 30 corpses near the entrance of the wormhole. There were even more corpses below the entrance because Lu Yi had just thrown several fire dragon techniques into the wormhole. Feng Lianzhu was dead and Feng Yu was captured. The Feng family did not even have anyone to take charge of the situation. Only a few of their 6th Order cultivators were left, and they were all fleeing deeper into the wormhole. When the cultivators from the sect arrived, Lu Yi took the lead and jumped into the wormhole. He led his people into a random passage and chased after them. The 700 cultivators entered the wormhole and chased after them separately. Only 2 people were left at the entrance of the wormhole. They were Hua Xiai and Feng Yu. Feng Yu stared blankly at the corpses around her. Her eyes were lifeless and her heart was dead. She had never imagined that just sending out a message would lead to such a result. Hua Xiai stood not far away from her, looking as gentle as jade. Although there was a gap in cultivation, Hua Xiai was not afraid that Feng Yu would do anything to her. Why would a medical cultivator make things difficult for a medical cultivator? Even if Feng Yu really wanted to do something, she could show her what it meant to grow mushrooms. This was also the reason why Lu Yi was relieved to let Hua Xiai look after Feng Yu. However, what Hua Xiai didn't expect was that Feng Yu just stood there in a daze. She didn't know if it was because the blow she received was too great, but she didn't try to run away or attack her. It wasn't until the first batch of Blue Blood sect cultivators returned that everyone else came back one after another. Some were injured and some died. Fighting in that kind of environment, death and injury were inevitable, but compared to the enemy's losses, these deaths and injuries were nothing. The cultivators of the Feng clan who escaped into the wormhole were all killed one by one. Lu Yi sent a message to Ding Yushu and asked if he needed help. He soon received a reply that Tenxiang Mountain had already retreated. This was an inevitable result. Unless Tenxiang Mountain really wanted to fight to the death with Everlasting Pavilion, they would definitely retreat after Ding Yushu returned with reinforcements. If they really fought like that, no one would gain any advantage. Since he was the guardian envoy of a sect, he still had the ability to make decisions. Fifth senior brother, who are we going to fight next? Gu Yang asked excitedly. He was one of the few 6th Order cultivators in the sect. The group of people looked over with anticipation. Although the continuous battles were tiring and were even accompanied by many dangers, the results were extremely glorious. Since ancient times on the Spirit Stream battlefield, no force had ever been able to destroy 2 enemy sect stations in such a short period of time, especially when it happened in the outer circle. Compared to the inner circle, it was much more difficult. The cultivators of Blue Blood sect who were still alive had all earned a lot of merit points and spoils of war. Return to the sect. What was there to fight? They were able to defeat Heavenly Fiend Temple with the help of the Insect Tide, and they were able to defeat Feng Family with the help of Everlasting Pavilion. At present, the insect tides of the various sects were almost dealt with, so it was impossible to block the cultivators of a certain sect in the wormhole. If they couldn't block the cultivators of other sects, they would have to forcibly attack other sects' stations. Even if they could borrow the insect tide, it would be a thankless task. What's more, the masters of Heavenly Fiend Temple and Feng Family were definitely on their way back. If they didn't return to the sect at this time and were caught by those 8th or 9th Order masters, or even those who cultivated heaven-grade secret arts, Blue Blood sect would suffer. Therefore, it was more important to return to the sect as soon as possible. Only by returning to their station would they be safe. Chapter 229. Following Lu Yi back to the station, the hundreds of cultivators chatted and laughed along the way, creating a lively atmosphere. This expedition was like a dream to all the cultivators. First, they dealt with the insect nest in their own encampment. Then, they headed north and killed their way into the Heavenly Fiend Hall's encampment. They killed hundreds of their cultivators and took over their encampment. After that, they went southeast and took down the Feng clan station, killing hundreds of their people. At this moment, everyone was about 60 kilometers east of their own station, which was not far away. Therefore, in less than half an hour, the group of hundreds of people returned to the station and saw the overwhelming number of insect race in front of Heavenly Fate Temple's square from afar. The insect tide from Heavenly Fiend Temple had obviously spread here. Surrounded by the endless insect race, Xiao Hui's huge figure was particularly eye-catching. From time to time, he would flap his wings and jump from one place to another, lowering his head and pecking, killing an insect race on the spot. With another peck, another insect race would die. Occasionally, he would raise his claws and claw a few times. The entire square was littered with insect race corpses. No one knew how long Xiao Hui had been killing here. Seeing this scene, Lu Yi felt relieved. The reason why he dared to bring all the cultivators from Jade Blood sect out was because Xiao Hui was in charge of the station. If anyone dared to barge in, Xiao Hui would teach them a lesson. Lu Yi had also thought of the current situation. He had taken hundreds of cultivators out for too long, and the insect nest of Heavenly Fiend Temple was only a few dozen kilometers away. If no one stopped them, the insect tide would definitely spread here. On the way back, Lu Yi had already arranged everything. The insect race here was generally strong, with many 3rd or 4th order cultivators, with no lack of 5th or 6th order cultivators. However, there were no 7th order cultivators. After all, this was the outermost area of the insect tide. The stronger ones were either in the insect nest or had been led to the Feng clan station by Lu Yi. Because they had already made arrangements, as soon as everyone rushed back, they moved in an orderly manner. The small teams were closely linked and constantly pushed forward, killing all the insect race in the square. As soon as there was a spirit energy fluctuation here, more insect race would be attracted. In front of the Tianji Hall, Lu Ye's hand was on the hilt of his saber. A stream of light flashed in front of him. Any insectoid that dared to approach the Tianji Hall would be immediately killed by his weapon. Inside the Heaven Secrets Hall, Hua Ci placed her hand on the Heaven Secrets pillar. The blessings that she had plundered from the Heaven Fiend Hall and the Feng clan could be converted into merit points and transferred to her Heaven Secrets pillar. Lu Yi did not know how many merit points he had obtained from converting those blessings into merit points, but he was certain that it would not be any less than what he had obtained from the Chess Sea. Although plundering blessings would result in a large loss, the Jade Blood sect had plundered 2 sects this time. Even if the Feng clan's blessings had been split equally with the Everlasting Pavilion, both the Heavenly Fiend Temple and the Feng clan had been operating for at least a few decades. How could their blessings on the Divine Pillar be any lesser? Not long after, Hua Si walked out of the heavenly secret hall. I got it. Is it expensive? It's so expensive, Hua Si said with a pained expression. That can't be helped. What other people have, we have to have too. We can't always be like this. Although we have little gray, it's better to be prepared. Do you know how to set it up? She knows. Hua Si tugged at Feng Yu, who was standing beside her. Although this woman was in a daze, as if she had been played both physically and mentally, she was still a garrison guardian. Compared to Lu Yi and Hua Si, who were dabblers, she was much better. When she met Lu Ye's probing gaze, Feng Yu's mouth twitched. She seemed to want to squeeze out a smile, but when she recalled Lu Yi stabbing her palm with a knife, she could not bring herself to smile. Her expression was extremely stiff. Let's go, Lu Yi called out. He led Hua Si and Feng Yu in a certain direction, ignoring the battlefield. The situation there was very stable. After going through so many battles, the combat experience of the cultivators under the sect had increased exponentially. Even without Lu Yi, they would have no problem dealing with the insect swarm. The three of them arrived at a corner at the edge of the encampment. Hua Si took out a box the size of a washbasin. It was squarish and looked like it was made of wood and gold. The box was engraved with various complicated patterns. If one looked carefully, they would realize that these patterns were all spirit inscriptions. This was the formation base for setting up the encampment's defensive formation. Basically, every sect had their own encampment's defensive or offensive formations. For example, the Heavenly Fiend Temple and the Feng clan had both. However, when the formation was broken, their formation base was destroyed at the same time. So, there was basically no way to seize this thing from others. In the Spirit Stream battlefield, only cultivators in the Spirit Stream realm could enter and leave freely. With the standard of a Spirit Stream realm cultivator, they could not refine such a formation base, nor could they set up a formation that could cover an entire encampment. Where did the formation base come from? The answer was to spend the sect's merit points to buy it from the Tianji treasure vault. Moreover, this was not something that a single cultivator could afford. How many merit points did this one cost? Lu Yi asked casually. 888. Lu Ye's heart skipped a beat. How many in total? 16. Lu Yi casually calculated in his mind and found that it was a very large number. Fortunately, the harvest this time was not small. Moreover, the more he spent, the stronger the formation would be. It was worth it. Are we just going to leave it here? We don't have time to deal with it now. When we have time later, we can bury it or make some camouflage. No, we have to get someone to look after it. This was a matter of merit points. Lu Yi sent out a message, and not long after, a group of cultivators ran over from the Tianji Hall. They were all covered in bug blood. You two stay here and look after this thing. Don't let anyone get close. Yes. The rest of you, come with me. Under Feng Yu's guidance, Hua Si set up the formation base all over the encampment. Lu Yi left 2 cultivators to guard each place. After some work, everything was finally set up. At this time, the sect's cultivators had finally cleared out the bugs in the encampment. There were still more outside, and they were pouring in endlessly. However, if they wanted to eradicate them, they would have to kill their way into the Heavenly Fiend Temple's bug nest and take the life core. Otherwise, the bug tide would be endless. This was no longer something that the cultivators on the periphery could do. Even Lu Yi did not dare to enter the wormhole now. Hua Si held a palm-sized jade plate in her hand. The jade plate flashed with light, and small spiritual inscriptions flowed on it. This was the formation plate that controlled all the formation bases. It was the core of the large formation. Even if a few of the formation bases were destroyed, it would only affect the power of the large formation. However, if this formation plate was destroyed, the large formation would be completely crippled. Chen Yu explained to her from the side, and Hua Si nodded repeatedly. As her spiritual energy surged, a buzzing sound suddenly came from all parts of the encampment. The positions where the formation plates were set up, and the spiritual energy surged, creating a wonderful resonance with each other. Immediately after, spiritual power like water ripples emerged from the 16 formation plates and spread in all directions. They fused with each other and gradually gathered in the sky. After half an hour, a semicircular light screen that enveloped the entire encampment was formed and shrouded the encampment. The large formation was complete. It was isolated from the outside world. With the protection of the large formation, there was no need to worry about the insect race attacking the encampment at any time. Although the insect race's gnawing was extremely destructive to the large formation's light screen, as long as their numbers did not accumulate to a certain extent, the light screen could repair itself. The essence of the light screen was the flow of spiritual power. Under Huasi's control, the Jade Blood Sect's large formation light screen was not completely sealed. There was still a gap that was wide enough for a few people, so the insect race could still rush in through this gap. However, with the cultivators in front of this gap, no matter how many insect race came, they would only be throwing their lives away. This could relieve the pressure on the large formation. The cultivators under the sect spontaneously began to clean up the battlefield, repair themselves, and take turns guarding the gap in the large formation. Everything was done in an orderly manner. Many people were injured in the battle, so Huasi led her helpers to treat their injuries. Originally, she was the only medical cultivator in the encampment, so she was a little busy. Now, there was Feng Yu. Feng Yu also did not want to. At this moment, her heart was in a mess, and her mind was filled with thoughts of colluding with the enemy to kill hundreds of her own cultivators. How could she be in the mood to treat others? Lu Yi placed his hand on the hilt of his saber and communicated with her in a very cordial manner. Feng Yu was impressed by his personal charm and could not help but devote herself to the glorious cause of healing the wounded and saving the dying. The injured cultivators were quickly treated properly and entered the cultivation room to repair themselves. After eating a full meal, they immediately became energetic again. With Chen Yu as the leader, several sixth-order cultivators in the sect spontaneously organized several waves of counterattacks against the insect race after consulting with Lu Yi. The results were quite good. But it was to no avail. Not long after, new insect race once again entered the encampment through the gap in the large formation. While the Jade Blood Sect was passing their days peacefully, a storm was brewing outside. First, the surviving cultivators of the Heavenly Fiend Temple and the Feng family spread the news that the Jade Blood Sect did not deal with their own insect nest during the outbreak of the natural disaster. Instead, they went all out to attack the encampment of others, causing the Heavenly Fiend Temple and the Feng family's encampment to be destroyed one after another. Countless cultivators from their sects were killed or injured, which then led to the outbreak of the insect race. When the news spread, the myriad Demon Ridge side naturally had a common enemy. While expressing their sympathy for the Heavenly Fiend Temple and the Feng family, they did their best to condemn and maliciously slander the Jade Blood Sect and its garrison envoy, Lu Yi. Before the Jade Blood Sect did not have Lu Yi, everything was fine. Even if there was some friction, it was just a normal confrontation between factions. However, with the addition of Lu Yi to the Jade Blood Sect, the surrounding 100 kilometers was in chaos. Now, the insect race had reached the doorsteps of many forces. Even a few Grand Heaven Alliance forces were implicated. Lu Yi of the Jade Blood Sect should die as an apology. The Grand Heaven Alliance was naturally celebrating. The encampments of the sects in the outer circle were rarely breached, let alone breaching the encampments of two sects by themselves. Most importantly, not only had the encampments been breached, but it was said that not many cultivators from the Heaven Fiend Palace and the Feng clan had died. Almost all of the cultivators in the spiritual stream tier had been killed. Chapter 230. This was a little terrifying. No one knew how Lu Yi did it, and some even suspected that someone was framing him. However, The rumors from Myriad Demon Ridge were so convincing that they had no choice but to believe it. Moreover, the Grand Heaven Alliance did not care about the process of the Jade Blood sect conquering the two forces of the Myriad Devil Ridge. Everyone only cared about the result. To the people of the Grand Heaven Alliance, conquering two forces in a short period of 2 to 3 days was undoubtedly an exciting matter. Therefore, the cultivators from both sides confronted each other in the air and quarreled fiercely. The smell of gunpowder in the entire Spirit Stream battlefield suddenly became very strong. However, as time passed, people soon discovered that the source of the insect tide outbreak wasn't Jade Blood Sect's wormhole, but Heaven Fiend Temple's wormhole. All the insects had rushed out from there. This discovery undoubtedly overturned some of the previous statements about Jade Blood Sect. Therefore, the two sides quarreled even more fiercely. Many cultivators from the inner circle had already rushed over, especially the cultivators from the Heaven Fiend Hall and the Phone Clan. They were the earliest to arrive. Since their own bases had already been occupied, how could they have the leisure to travel outside? Naturally, they hurried back to help their surviving junior brothers and sisters rebuild their bases. In addition to the cultivators from these two forces, cultivators from other forces also rushed over. They weren't here to watch the show, but to kill the insects. For them, the scale of the insect tide here wasn't inferior to that of the inner circle. Naturally, they could obtain merits by eliminating the insects here. How could there be no friction between the cultivators from both sides when they met? For a time, in the wild where the insect tide was located, there would be battles between 8th and 9th order cultivators from time to time. There were even masters who cultivated heaven-grade secret arts, causing this area to become extremely lively. Lu Yi didn't know which side won this conflict. 3 days after he led the cultivators from his sect back to their station, the insect tide was finally contained. A master killed his way into Heaven Fiend Temple's insect nest, broke the meat sac at the core, and took away the vitality core. Today was the 4th day since everyone returned to their station. Jade Blood Sect's spirit array was maintained at the lowest level, and a light curtain enveloped the station. In front of the square of Heaven's secret hall, Lu Yi sat on the steps and flipped through the books that Madame Yun had brought over. In the square in front of him, there was a huge pile of spoils of war. These spoils of war were looted by the cultivators under his sect. A few days ago, they had not finished dealing with the insect stampede, and had not been counted until today. The spoils of war naturally didn't belong to whoever snatched them. Everyone had worked together, so they had to tally up the spoils before distributing them. "Fifth senior brother, everything is here," He Xin reported. Lu Yi nodded and looked up. He saw a large pile of things, but he quickly frowned because there were many tables and chairs in the pile. There were even pots and pans. The corners of his eyes couldn't help but twitch. What were they snatching? Feng Yu hugged her legs and curled up in a corner outside Tianji Hall. She had a desolate expression on her face as she couldn't help but shrink back. This was because she saw a few familiar pieces of furniture in the huge pile of items that was clearly something from her room. "These people from the Blue Blood sect, are you bandits?" Lu Yi felt a headache coming on. "Why did you bring back all these tables and chairs, bedding, pots and pans?" He seriously suspected that if it weren't for the fact that the storage bag couldn't hold such a big thing as a bed, the beds in the two sects' encampments would have been brought back. Chen Yu chuckled and said, "We don't have much in the encampment now. Moreover, the quality of the items from these two sects is very good. These chairs can be placed in Tianji Hall. In the future, when we discuss matters, we'll have a place to sit." What he said did make some sense. "Let's clean up these miscellaneous items first. Whoever wants them can take them." The surrounding cultivators immediately rushed forward. Although the scene was chaotic, no one fought over the chairs. Chen Yu first chose a few chairs and brought them into the heavenly secret hall. The rest of the cultivators took what they needed. Soon, the tables, chairs, benches, and everything else disappeared. He carried a jade pillow and came to Lu Ye's side. "Fifth senior brother, I left one for you." Lu Yi responded. Nowadays, he usually stayed in the cultivation room in the encampment. However, he actually had his own residence. It was a house that Chen Yu had previously led people to build for him. The location was excellent and Hua Ci lived next to it. However, Lu Yi hadn't been to that house yet, and there wasn't much furniture inside. Not far away, Feng Yu stared at the jade pillow and wailed in her heart, "That's mine. It's mine." Without those eyesores, the remaining items were useful to cultivators, including some spirit tools, elixirs, spirit stones, spirit talismans, and so on. Most of them were spirit tools. The hundreds of people from the Heavenly Fiend Temple had died in the wormhole. The Blue Blood sect couldn't collect the spoils of war after their death. In the end, no one knew who had benefited. Most of the spoils of war here came from the hundreds of people from the Feng clan. Everyone left behind a spirit tool after their death. There were hundreds of spirit tools alone. The second largest number were unopened storage bags. The number was basically the same as the spirit tools. Only a small portion of the storage bags were open, and the items inside had been taken out. It was troublesome to distribute these spoils of war because even if they got the unopened storage bags, they didn't know how much they were worth. They might get rich overnight or they might get nothing. Lu Yi divided the cultivators under his sect into 10 teams. There were about 70 people in each team. They took turns to go forward and choose their spoils of war. For example, if they chose storage bags, they would take 1, a spirit tool, 2 spirit talismans, 20 spirit stones, and 20 spirit pills. In this way, whether they lost or gained depended on their judgment and luck. The teams took turns to go forward. Some took the risk to choose storage bags, while others chose spirit tools. Those who lacked elixirs took spirit pills, and those who didn't have spirit stones took spirit stones. It couldn't be said who took advantage and who lost. Everyone took what they needed. After 2 rounds, there wasn't enough left to go around. Lu Yi asked people to collect the spoils and confiscate them. He would accumulate them and distribute them the next time there were spoils of war. Before the battle, I'll say it first. The top 10 meritorious services will be rewarded with spirit stones. The top 3 will get a 9 forbidden spirit artifact. Chen Yu. Yes. What's the result of the merit statistics? The statistics have been completed. The top 10 have been listed. Read it out. Chen Yu immediately shouted, "First place in the merit rankings, Chen Yu." After calling out his name, he touched his nose a little embarrassedly. He then read out the names of the remaining 9 people. Unsurprisingly, there were several 6th-order cultivators among them. What surprised Lu Yi was that Yi was ranked 2nd. Hua Ci will give out the rewards for these 10 people later. Also, have you calculated the merit of each team? Yes. Which team is the first? He-Shin's team. In the crowd, He-Shin stood up straight and grinned foolishly. Lu Yi nodded at her and said encouragingly, "Very good. Keep up the good work. Everyone in your team can make a request of me that is within my power. You can make it now or later. When you've made up your mind, come find me. In addition, you have won a lot of merit points in this battle. I have discussed it with your 6th senior sister and decided to give everyone some merit points. It's not much, just 20 points per person. Just treat it as a reward for the sect." As soon as these words came out, all the cultivators were overjoyed. Although everyone got a lot of merit points in the fight against the insect tide, who would complain about having more merit points? Moreover, 20 points per person meant nearly 700 cultivators. That was 10 to 20,000 merit points. For a moment, they were incomparably glad that they joined or attached themselves to the Blue Blood sect. With just 1 insect tide, they made a lot of money. How bad would their future be? Finally, the sect has decided to recruit another 200 disciples from among those who performed well. The list will be announced soon. Your 6th senior sister is waiting for you in the Divine Secret Hall. Line up and get your merit points from her. The 700 cultivators immediately lined up in a long line and walked into the divine secret hall one by one. They then walked out happily. Hua Si busied herself for half a day before she finished giving everyone 20 merit points. After that, she used the remaining merit points to buy blessings from the divine secret pillar, increasing the number of blessings from the divine secret pillar to 19. As a result, the world chi in the encampment increased significantly, more than twice as much as in the wild. At this point, it would not be easy to increase the world chi in the encampment because the next blessings required 10,000 merit points. Including the merit points distributed to the cultivators and the purchase of the sect protecting formation, the Blue Blood sect had plundered 80 to 90,000 merit points from the other two sects this time. This was twice as much as what Lu Yi and Hua Si had obtained in the Chess Sea. It seemed that if they wanted to quickly increase the world chi in the encampment, they would have to attack other encampments and plunder their merit points. However, attacking an encampment was not an easy task. They had been able to succeed this time because of the insect tide. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for the Blue Blood sect to succeed with their own strength. Perhaps they could join forces with the Everlasting Veranda to attack Tenxiang Mountain? Lu Yi had a devious idea, but it was not appropriate. If they really did this, Tenxiang Mountain would not sit still and wait for death. They would definitely send a message to the nearby myriad Devil Ridge forces. If anyone took the opportunity to attack the Everlasting Veranda's encampment, the Everlasting Veranda would have to withdraw. If there was a way to quickly break the formation, they could do whatever they wanted. This made Lu Yi feel that he needed to properly hone his Tao of Spirit tattoos. There were 6 people in He Xin's team. 3 of them came to find Lu Yi 2 days later and expressed their desire to have a training room of their own. Lu Yi naturally agreed. Using his authority as a guardian, he allocated 3 of the training rooms to them and carefully constructed the spirit-gathering spirit runes for them. The list of the 200 newly recruited disciples was also posted, attracting the attention of the cultivators in the sect. Those who were included in the list were naturally overjoyed. The insect tide had passed, and the disciples now had pills, spirit stones, and merit points. The world chi in the encampment had risen again, so naturally, they were all cultivating crazily. However, in this peaceful atmosphere, there was one person who did not fit in with the entire Blue Blood sect, and that was the captured Fengyu. Chapter 231. After capturing Fengyu, Lu Yi didn't bother with her anymore. He didn't even have anyone keep an eye on her. He had originally planned to break her legs if she dared to escape, but she had no intention of escaping at all. Every day, she would either sit there in a daze or stare blankly into space with a sorrowful expression. In Tianji Hall, Lu Yi sat on a large chair. He didn't know which family this chair belonged to, but it was now the Jade Blood Sect's. Fengyu stood in front of him obediently with her hands folded over her lower abdomen. As expected of a medical cultivator, it had only been a few days, but the puncture wounds on her palms had mostly healed. There wasn't even a scar left behind. Why hasn't anyone come to ransom you? Lu Yi had been waiting for the Feng clan to ransom her. In the Spirit Stream battlefield, medical cultivators who were captured by the enemy could be ransomed for a certain price. Moreover, Fengyu was not only a medical cultivator, but also a guardian of the Feng clan. With such a status, her value shouldn't be low. In Lu Ye's opinion, Fengyu was a large sum of spirit stones and spirit pills. He was prepared to bargain with the Feng clan, but who would have thought that the Feng clan wouldn't do anything? This made him a little impatient. Fengyu lowered her head and said in a voice as soft as a mosquito, "The Feng clan probably thinks I'm dead." Bullshit. This woman was a little dishonest. The seal masters or sect masters of the sect were able to find out whether their disciples were dead or alive. For example, when Lu Yi had been stranded in the Spirit Stream battlefield, although the sect master and second senior sister didn't know where he was, they knew that he was still alive. This was because he had the Jade Blood sect's seal on him. As long as the seal didn't disappear, he wasn't dead. Moreover, Feng Yu and the other Feng clan cultivators must have placed their seals on each other. The Feng clan cultivators who were familiar with her could determine whether she was alive or dead based on the existence of the seal. If Feng Yu was really dead, then the seal that belonged to her would vanish. Lu Yi didn't know everything, so how could he be fooled by Feng Yu's words? Who's in charge of the Feng clan's base now? Although most of the Feng clan's original Spirit Stream realm cultivators were dead, there were definitely powerhouses from the inner or core realm who had rushed back. If he wanted ransom, he would have to contact someone who was in charge. Feng Yu pursed her lips and did not answer. Lu Yi raised his hand and pressed down on the hilt of the Mount Pan blade. Accompanied by an ear-piercing sound of friction, the long blade was slowly unsheathed. "It's my third brother, Feng Xiangyang," Feng Yu hurriedly replied. The young man in front of her was the kind of person who would really stab her with a knife without saying a word. Although the injury on her palm had healed, every time she thought of that stab, her palm would still hurt. Contact him and tell him that if he wants to ransom him, he'll have to fork out 100,000 spirit stones. The scale of the Spirit Stream realm disciples in the Jade Blood sect was not small, and their monthly salary was at least a few thousand spirit stones. He couldn't always ask his second senior apprentice sister for money. The Jade Blood sect had been in decline for many years, and his second senior apprentice sister was not wealthy. Previously, the Jade Blood sect had not been able to produce much, but now their situation was much better. Because their two neighbors had been completely destroyed, the Jade Blood sect was in charge of the surrounding 100-kilometer area. Whatever else the mine produced would belong to the Jade Blood sect in the future, and the Heaven Fiend Hall and the Feng clan would no longer have anything to do with it. The disciples had also opened up many spirit fields in the encampment, and Hua Si had brought people to plant medicinal herbs and spirit plants there to supplement the family's income. However, this would take time to accumulate. If they could get some ransom money from the Feng clan, it would alleviate the financial pressure on the Jade Blood sect. The Feng clan would not give so much. Feng Yu looked at Lu Yi in shock. 100,000 spirit stones, he really dared to ask for it. She had never thought that this young man with thick eyebrows and big eyes would be such a black-hearted guy. Thinking about it, if this guy wasn't black-hearted, how could he have used the insect tide to attack the encampments of two factions? Stop talking nonsense and hurry up and contact him. Under Lu Ye's persuasion, Feng Yu had no choice but to contact Feng Xiangyang. In fact, Feng Xiangyang had already contacted Feng Yu before this and knew about her current situation. He had even asked her to tell Lu Yi that he would pay some spirit stones to ransom Feng Yu. However, Feng Yu had never mentioned this to Lu Yi. As for why she didn't come over herself, she didn't have the guts. All the Myriad Demons Ridge cultivators within 1,000 kilometers knew that they should never come within 10 kilometers of the Jade Blood sect's encampment. There was once an 8th Order Heaven-grade Myriad Demons Ridge cultivator who passed by the Jade Blood sect's encampment on his artifact, but a shadow covered him and he was gone. So, it wasn't that the Feng clan didn't want to ransom Feng Yu, but that they didn't have a suitable channel to contact each other. What if you can't contact him? Feng Yu raised her eyes and quietly looked at Lu Yi. Lu Yi pulled out his mountain coiling saber and placed it at his feet. His meaning was obvious. Feng Yu hurriedly sent a message. After a while, she said softly, "I've contacted him." "What do you mean?" Lu Yi asked casually as he activated his spiritual power in his palm. Streams of Yin essence and Yang essence fused together, gradually forming the embryonic form of a spirit pattern. "They can pay 3,000 spirit stones," Feng Yu replied weakly. The spirit inscription that was about to form suddenly collapsed due to the chaos of spirit qi. Lu Yi looked up at Feng Yu. 3,000. Then you're useless. It wasn't that Lu Yi didn't want to bargain with the other party, but he had offered a price of 100,000, and the other party had countered with 3,000. There was no sincerity in this. Continuing to bargain would be a waste of time. Kong Niu! Lu Yi shouted at Kong Niu, who was standing in front of the divine pillar, busy with something. The burly Kong Niu turned his head and responded in a muffled voice. Drag this woman down and kill her! Oh! Kong Niu strode forward. Under Feng Yu's horrified gaze, a large hand as big as a palm leaf fan reached out and grabbed her hair. Then, Kong Niu turned around and dragged her out. Kong Niu was a dull person. In the past, he only obeyed Hua Xi's orders, but now there was Lu Yi. Feng Yu was dumbfounded. It wasn't until she was a distance away that she shouted, "The Feng family wants me to take responsibility for the loss of the station, so they can't give me too many spirit stones." She struggled wildly and broke free from Kong Niu's grip. She crawled to Lu Yi and knelt on the ground. She raised her head and said with tears in her eyes, "The Feng family has internal strife. The faction I belong to used to be in power, but now it has lost the station under my control. Even if I'm a medical cultivator, the Feng family is doomed after being redeemed. How can they spend too many spirit stones on a person who is bound to die? They just want me to take responsibility for this." Kong Niu stood not far away. He looked down at the broken hair in his hand, then turned around and walked toward Feng Yu. Lu Yi raised his hand and Kong Niu's tall figure stood behind Feng Yu, shrouding her in his shadow. Lu Yi lowered his head and looked at the disheveled woman in front of him. "In other words, I can't get too many spirit stones from the Feng family? Absolutely impossible." Lu Yi thought of Dong Shai. This guy betrayed the sect because they lost the station. The responsibility of this matter was too great for a seventh-order cultivator to bear. As Feng Yu said, even if she was a medical cultivator, even if she had the support of a powerful figure behind her, the Feng family would definitely die after being redeemed this time. The station was lost, and countless disciples were killed or injured. If this matter wasn't punished, how could they explain it to the cultivators who died? How could they convince the masses in the future? Then what use do you have? Lu Yi felt a little vexed. Originally, he had thought that Feng Yu's status as a guardian meant that her value would not be low. But now, it seemed that he had underestimated the situation. It was precisely because of her status as a guardian that the Feng family could not pay a high price to ransom her back and execute her. The Feng family's spirit stones did not grow on trees. "I'm a medical cultivator. I can switch to the blue blood sect," Feng Yu said anxiously. Looking at her appearance, it was obvious that she had already planned to do so. "I'm afraid you're dreaming." Feng Yu dared to switch to the blue blood sect in order to survive, but Lu Yi didn't dare to accept her. He had captured the Feng family station and killed hundreds of their cultivators. Then, he took in the guardian. If Feng Yu had any evil intentions, would Lu Yi have to be on guard against her in the future? Moreover, switching to a sect would cost a lot of merit points, because it would cost a lot of merit points to forcibly erase the imprint of one's force. No, Feng Yu was the Feng family's guardian. She had the right to erase the imprints of the cultivators in the sect, including her own. As for her loyalty to the blue blood sect, it wasn't difficult to solve. Feng Yu just had to swear a heaven's secret oath. Through these few contacts, Lu Yi had figured out the nature of this woman. When it came to her life or death, she was very soft. This could be seen from her decisive kneeling at the beginning. It was true that she was a woman, but she was also a seventh-order cultivator. In the face of a life and death crisis, she had knelt down just like that. If she didn't have some courage, she wouldn't have done such a thing. But sometimes she was very stubborn. When Lu Yi asked her to pass false information to the Feng family cultivators to deceive them into coming out of the wormhole, Feng Yu would rather die than submit. In short, she was very selfish, but she also didn't lack loyalty to the force she belonged to. Slowly leaning down, Lu Yi raised his hand and pinched Feng Yu's chin. "How many merit points do you have?" "More than 4,000. Feng Yu knew that this was a matter of life or death, so she didn't dare to lie. Lu Yi let go of her, got up and walked to the heaven's secret pillar. Soon, He came back with a heaven's secret contract and threw it to Feng Yu. "Sign it." Feng Yu knelt on the ground and took a look. She found that the heaven's secret contract was densely packed with clauses, including that from now on, she couldn't do anything to harm the cultivators of the Blue Blood sect, she couldn't tell anyone about the Blue Blood sect, and she couldn't hold a grudge against Lu Yi and the people around him. All in all, there were at least 20 or so of them. Feng Yu's scalp went numb. She really couldn't understand how Lu Yi could come up with so many clauses in such a short time. If she signed such a heaven's secret contract, she would no longer be a threat to the Blue Blood sect in the future. "Is this a contract to sell myself?" Feng Yu raised her head and looked at Lu Yi aggrievedly. The situation was a little different from what she had imagined. "Just tell me if you want to sign it or not." Chapter 232. A moment later, Lu Yi put away the heaven's secret contract and an invisible force fell from the heavens and entered Feng Yu's body. "Erase your own battlefield imprint," Lu Yi ordered. Feng Yu, who was disappointed, heard this and replied happily, "Yes." A moment later, a red light on the back of Feng Yu's hand collapsed and dissipated into specks of fluorescent light. This was a sign that the battlefield imprint had been erased. Lu Yi took out his guardian envoy seal and blew a breath on it. He beckoned to Feng Yu and said, "Today, I accept rogue cultivator Feng Yu as an in-name disciple of the Jade Blood sect. I respectfully request Heaven's secret to bear witness." He placed the seal on the back of her hand. Blue light surged and Feng Yu looked at Lu Yi with gratitude in her eyes. Although she had lost her status as a guardian envoy, it was still good to keep her life. "Donate 4,000 merit points." Feng Yu hurriedly ran to the Heaven's secret pillar. She was only a 7th-order cultivator, so it was impossible for her to accumulate so many merit points under normal circumstances. But don't forget, she was the Feng family's guardian envoy. Naturally, she could do some things to fill her own pockets, just like how Lu Yi could give her a monthly salary. However, Lu Yi's monthly salary was earned by him and Hua Ci in the Chessi, so he had no qualms about it. But the Feng family was different. Lu Yi had only decided to accept her as an in-name disciple of the Jade Blood sect after hearing that she had more than 4,000 merit points. Simply put, this was the price for Feng Yu's life. Since he couldn't get a satisfactory ransom from the Feng family, it wasn't bad to get some merit points from Feng Yu. Otherwise, why would he kidnap her? To keep her as a vase? If he wanted to please his eyes, he could just look at Hua Ci more. "Fifth senior brother, the donation is done." Feng Yu returned and imitated others to call Lu Yi fifth senior brother. Lu Yi glanced at her and said loudly, "Jade Blood sect's in-name disciple Feng Yu has been disrespectful to the sect. I, Lu Yi, take away Feng Yu's status as an in-name disciple. I respectfully request Heaven's secret to bear witness." Feng Yu stared at Lu Yi in a daze. She felt the mark on the back of her hand collapse again, turning into fluorescent light and dissipating. She really didn't expect Lu Yi to burn the bridge in front of her like this. Moreover, she had only called him fifth senior brother. How was that disrespectful to the sect? Was she not affectionate enough? Only now did she realize that the only value she had to Lu Yi was those 4,000 merit points. The only reason he had taken her in as a disciple was to make it easier for her to donate merit points. Right now, she had already been squeezed dry and had no more value. Her body was a little weak, and she staggered back, her voice carrying a sobbing tone. "Do you still want to kill me? How could that be? No matter what, you've contributed 4,000 merit points to my sect. Moreover, I don't usually kill women. I was just scaring you before. If you want to stay, it's up to you. If you want to leave, it's up to you. That's all." After Lu Yi finished speaking, he walked to the Tianji pillar and returned to his sect, leaving Feng Yu standing there in a daze. After a while, she began to cry. She had nothing left. It was impossible for Lu Yi to take Feng Yu into his sect, not even as a rogue cultivator. No matter what, Feng Yu was the original guardian of the Feng family. He could kidnap her or kill her, but he couldn't take her in. This was related to the tacit understanding between the two camps. Otherwise, if everyone did this in the future, the captured medical cultivator would have no choice but to submit to the enemy even if she didn't die. With the Tianji contract, Lu Yi wasn't worried that Feng Yu would have any adverse thoughts about the Jade Blood sect, so she could leave if she wanted to. If she didn't want to leave and chose to stay, even if the myriad Devil Ridge found her, it could be explained away as the Jade Blood sect and the Feng family failing to negotiate a ransom. It wasn't that the Jade Blood sect didn't want to release her, but that the Feng family didn't pay enough and didn't have any sincerity. Lu Yi estimated that this woman probably wouldn't leave. The Feng family was worried that they wouldn't be able to catch her. If she dared to leave the Jade Blood sect's encampment, she would be walking into a trap. Therefore, she would probably stay. It was equivalent to the Jade Blood sect picking up a nameless medical cultivator for free. This was wonderful. Now that the insect tide had just passed, the Spirit Stream battlefield would probably be peaceful for a while. The two neighbors of the Jade Blood sect had been beaten to a pulp. Whether it was the Heaven Fiend Hall or the Feng family, they no longer had the capital to fight against the Jade Blood sect. It was the best time for the Jade Blood sect to take over the nearby mineral veins. Hua Ci would arrange this matter, so Lu Yi didn't have to worry about it. He decided to take this opportunity to go to Bright Heart Peak and learn the way of spirit tattoos from Madame Yun. It would be best if he could learn how to break arrays. After tasting the sweetness of attacking and occupying someone else's encampment, Lu Yi was now craving for more. Although killing myriad Devil Ridge cultivators could earn him merits, it wasn't as fast as attacking and occupying an encampment. Therefore, breaking arrays was the key. As long as he could break other people's defensive arrays, he could do whatever he wanted. After returning to the sect, Lu Yi called for Hu Po and went straight to Bright Heart Peak. Over the past few days, he had finished constructing the 2 spirit tattoos that Madame Yun had taught him. The 2 spirit tattoos were useless numeric spirit tattoos. After familiarizing himself with them, although there were times when he failed during the construction process, he could still be considered skilled. The only thing left was the accumulation of time and experience. After stating the purpose of his visit, Madame Yun laughed. "You want to break other people's defensive arrays?" "Yes." Madame Yun shook her head and said, "That's too far away for you. If you want to break arrays, you have to know how to set up arrays first." "Do you know how to set up arrays?" "No, I can learn." Madame Yun pondered for a moment and said, "Originally, with your attainments in the way of spirit tattoos, you shouldn't have come into contact with these things so early. However, your talent is extraordinary, and you've also obtained the inheritance of a spirit tattooist. You can't be judged by common sense, and can speed up the progress of your cultivation. Before that, I'll test you." She raised her hand and several books flew over and placed in front of Lu Yi. "I'll give you half a day to finish reading these books." After Madame Yun left, Lu Yi picked up one of the books and studied it carefully. He had brought back a lot of books from Madame Yun, and those books recorded the basics of spirit tattoos. Now, the content recorded in these books had obviously exceeded the scope of the basics and reached the practical stage. Moreover, they all explained how to break spirit tattoos. Since spirit tattoos could be constructed, they could also be broken. Breaking spirit tattoos was a method to break arrays. No matter what kind of array it was, spirit tattoos played a role in it. If the spirit tattoos in the array were broken, the array would naturally be unable to be maintained. The foundation that he had laid before came in handy at this time. Otherwise, even if Lu Yi held these books, he wouldn't be able to understand what they said. Lu Yi studied with all his heart. Occasionally, when he saw something wonderful, he would have a feeling of understanding. Many things that he had been puzzled about before were answered at this moment. The harvest was huge. Half a day's time was just enough for Lu Yi to study these books once. Madame Yun returned and took out a 10-inch square crystal slab, which was inlaid with spirit stones. As her spirit power surged, a spirit tattoo immediately appeared on the crystal slab. If such a spirit tattoo was not constantly replenished with spirit power, it would disappear very quickly. The spirit stones inlaid on the crystal slab were used to replenish spirit power, so it could be maintained after it was constructed. Break it. Madame Yun handed the crystal slab to Lu Yi. Lu Yi took it solemnly and channeled his spirit power into the spirit tattoo, sensing the structure of this spirit tattoo. If he wanted to break a spirit tattoo, he first had to understand the structure of this spirit tattoo, which was the most basic analysis. At the very least, he had to know how much yin and yang energy this spirit tattoo was made up of. Only then could he have a chance of breaking it. If he couldn't figure it out, it would be impossible to break it. The way to break a spirit tattoo was to build the opposite foundation and let the spirit tattoo gradually melt. In other words, if he wanted to break a spirit tattoo, he had to build something that was completely opposite to the foundation. Lu Yi had done the analysis of spirit tattoos before, so he naturally had experience. Therefore, after observing for a moment, he knew what to do. Then, he channeled his spirit power and tried to break the spirit tattoo. But soon, the spirit tattoo suddenly became chaotic and his spirit power exploded. The first attempt failed. Madame Yun took the crystal slab and constructed an identical spirit tattoo before handing it to Lu Yi. Lu Yi continued to try to break it. He failed again and again. After each failure, Madame Yun would reconstruct the spirit tattoo and hand it to Lu Yi again. She didn't get tired of it. Time passed slowly. His progress wasn't fast, but Lu Yi wasn't impatient. Instead, he accumulated experience through his failures and searched for the trick. Madame Yun said that his talent in the Tao of Spirit Tattoo was extraordinary. In fact, this wasn't his own talent, but because of the talent tree. Every time he obtained a spirit tattoo from the talent tree, he would be able to obtain all the knowledge about that spirit tattoo at the same time. It was deeply rooted, as if he had cultivated it himself. The knowledge that came with those spirit tattoos was often used with other spirit tattoos. However, it was Lu Ye's own ability to use these common knowledge. After a full 6 hours, Lu Yi had only broken less than 20% of the spirit tattoo. Based on this speed, it would take at least a few days of cultivation and some luck to completely break this spirit tattoo. However, this wasn't the case. After another 2 hours, Lu Ye's progress improved by leaps and bounds, directly breaking 80% of the spirit tattoo. This was because he had found some practical tricks from his repeated failures. After another 2 hours, the spirit tattoo was finally completely broken. Madame Yun nodded. Not bad. You didn't study for nothing. It's late. Come back tomorrow and continue. Yes. Lu Yi got up and took a few books that he hadn't read from Madame Yun before riding Hupa back to Jingshou Peak. A moment later, he squatted at the kitchen door with a big bowl in his arms and stuffed himself with food. His mind was filled with spirit tattoo matters, and Shui Yuan kept adding food to his bowl. An hour later, Lu Yi returned to the encampment with a round belly. He didn't know why he had eaten so much today. Days passed. Lu Yi went to Brightheart Peak to learn the Tao of Spirit Tattoo from Madame Yun during the day, and returned to the encampment to cultivate and read at night. Every day was very fulfilling. He didn't go to the Mirage Realm again. Before he had the confidence to pass all 9 stages in one go, Lu Yi didn't plan to enter. Although he had a total of 5,000 merit points now, he couldn't waste them. Chapter 233. After returning from the Go Sea, Lu Yi had 5,352 merit points. Later on, he spent 2,000 merit points to buy 10 sets of Earth Core Fire and frequently entered the Mirage Realm to train. As a result, his merit points gradually decreased. In the process of dealing with the insect tide, he obtained a lot of merit points. Later on, Hua Ci decided to give him a portion of his monthly salary, which was 5,000 merit points. Therefore, Lu Yi didn't lack merit points for the time being. In order to speed up the process of learning spiritual runes from Madame Yun, he bought 10 sets of earth core fire from the Tianji treasure vault and let the talent tree devour them one by one. This was because he discovered that the more spiritual runes he mastered, the higher his attainment in spiritual runes would be. It would also be easier for him to learn other things related to spiritual runes. This led to his cultivation of spiritual runes at Madame Yun's place to make rapid progress, which was greatly praised by Madame Yun. On the first day, he spent an entire day to barely decipher one spiritual rune. However, on the second day, he only took 4 hours to decipher one spiritual rune. On the third day, it only took him an hour to decipher one spiritual rune. After 5 to 6 days, no matter how complicated the spiritual rune constructed by Madame Yun was, Lu Yi could decipher it in a short time. Deciphering a single spiritual rune was no longer difficult for him. Therefore, Madame Yun constructed a mosaic type of spiritual inscription. The so-called mosaic type of spiritual inscription was to use a special method to combine 2, 3, or even more spiritual inscriptions together. Then, these spiritual inscriptions would influence each other and exert a stronger effect. This kind of mosaic type of spirit inscriptions also had another name, and that was restriction. Lu Yi had studied restriction in the past, and was confused because he found that the so-called restriction was built with spiritual runes as the foundation. However, at that time, he didn't systematically learn spiritual runes, so he didn't know much about it and didn't understand it. Now that he had received Madame Yun's guidance, his attainment in spiritual runes was no longer the same as before. The number of restrictions depended on the number of spiritual runes that formed the restriction. For example, the reason why Lu Ye's Pan-Shan saber was called a 9 restrictions spiritual weapon was because it was engraved with 9 spiritual runes. These 9 spiritual runes were cleverly embedded together to form a whole. Lu Yi started with the mosaic spirit inscriptions that were used to decipher 2 restrictions, then quickly increased to decipher 3 restrictions, then 4 restrictions. Right now, when he was learning from Madame Yun, it felt like he was playing a game with Madame Yun. Madame Yun would use spirit runes to set questions, and Lu Yi would then solve them. Maybe to those who didn't know much about the Tao of spirit runes, this kind of thing would be very boring. However, Lu Yi felt that it was very interesting because the process of deciphering it was different every time. Moreover, with the accumulation of experience and Madame Yun's guidance, he could also learn a lot of useful knowledge and technique. After returning from senior apprentice Sister Xueyuan, Hua Si went straight to the technique practicing room. Like Lu Yi, she often spent the night in the technique practicing room, so she didn't pay much attention to her lifestyle. Compared to her days in Ying Mountain, her current life undoubtedly made her feel more comfortable. She didn't have to work hard every day to set up a stall. There were many junior brothers and sisters in the sect, and there was also a second senior sister in the sect who could teach her. Moreover, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the station was much richer than in Ying Mountain. Since Lu Yi brought her to Blue Blood sect, she slowly fell in love with it. Under senior apprentice Sister Shu Yuan's guidance, her medical skills also improved by leaps and bounds. With a gentle smile on her face that made people feel warm, she greeted the junior brothers and sisters she met on the way and pushed open the door to her technique practicing room. Suddenly she paused, took a few steps back, and looked around. Yes, this was her technique practicing room, but there was one more person in the room. She looked carefully again, and only then did she see what the person was doing. She laughed involuntarily. Was he finally going to make a move on those stocks? In the past, she had thought of sending these things to the nearest Heavenly Secret Commerce Alliance to get rid of them, but when her second senior sister learned of this matter, she told her to keep these things because Lu Yi might need them at some point. Now it seemed that it was time for them to come in handy. Entering the technique practicing room and closing the door, Hua Si walked in front of Lu Yi and saw him sitting in the corner. There were some storage bags piled up on his left and right side. There were more on the left side and very few on the right side, only a dozen or so. Hua Xi casually took one of the dozen or so storage bags on the right side. After a brief inspection, she found that these storage bags, which were originally locked, had been opened, and the things inside could be taken out. After learning from Madame Yun to crack the spiritual inscriptions for half a month, Lu Yi still had a long way to go before he could crack other people's great protective array, but cracking the restriction in the storage bag was not a big problem. The storage bag was actually sewn with a special kind of demonic beast skin. This kind of demonic beast skin had the characteristic of expanding space when it came into contact with spiritual power. After some processing, it was most suitable to be used to make storage bags. It was not difficult to cultivate this kind of demonic beast. Many sects in 9 regions cultivated this kind of demonic beast and sold the demonic beast skin to increase the sect's income. There were even some sects that specialized in making money from this. Because of this, the storage bag itself was not very valuable, because the cost of making a storage bag was not high. Every storage bag was branded with spiritual inscriptions by a spiritual tattooist. Different spiritual tattooists had different habits, so the types of spiritual inscriptions they engraved were different. However, without exception, there would be a restriction with deflagration as the core. This restriction was the key to the storage bag. This restriction used deflagration as the core and was constructed by a special method. If it rashly came into contact with strange spiritual power, it would quickly burn up and then destroy the entire storage bag. That was why there was a restriction lock. Every storage bag had a restriction lock, and the key to open the lock was the spiritual power of a practitioner. Of course, because of this restriction, there was another profession in the cultivation world called locksmith. Lu Yi had invited a locksmith to open the storage bag in the Tianji Business Alliance. He had made a profit and lost a lot. In short, there were risks in lockpicking, so he should be cautious in his investment. With Lu Ye's current attainments in spiritual tattoos, he was more than qualified to be a locksmith. According to Madame Yun, those who were really talented in spiritual tattoos would not be locksmith. The so-called locksmiths were just dabblers in spiritual tattooists, who could not enter the Hall of Elegance. However, Lu Yi now needed such experience to train himself. Although learning from Madame Yun made rapid progress, there was no harm in seeing the means of other spiritual tattooists. This was also Madame Yun's suggestion. According to her, spiritual tattoos required talent, skill, practice, and accumulation. None of them could be omitted. Just as Hua Xi was checking those storage bags, Lu Yi suddenly threw out the storage bag in his hand. Before it fell to the ground, the storage bag burned up and soon turned into ashes. Hua Xi looked up at him. "Did I disturb you?" "No." Lu Yi picked up another storage bag expressionlessly and continued to crack the restriction inside. Although he had a very high success rate now, there were always times when he failed. This was unavoidable in the early stage. A moment later, he opened the storage bag in his hand. After checking it for a while, he threw it aside. Generally speaking, those guardians and deputy guardians who participated in the defense of Ling Shi were not too poor. There were always some spiritual stones, spiritual pills, spiritual talismans, and the like in their storage bags. However, they did not see any good things that would make their eyes light up. Everyone knew that participating in the defense of Ling Shi was a very dangerous thing. If they really carried any good things with them and were killed, wouldn't it be convenient for the enemy? Therefore, the things in these storage bags were generally very practical and not too valuable. And these things were exactly what Hua Xi needed now. With so many things in the storage bags accumulated together, it was also a considerable amount of wealth. In the dead of night, Lu Yi unlocked the storage bags while Hua Xi sat cross-legged in the center of the spirit-gathering array to cultivate. It was not until dawn that Lu Yi finished dealing with all the storage bags. Among them, there were about a dozen destroyed storage bags, which was not a lot. In terms of efficiency, it was already very good. After all, Lu Yi had never done this before. He had to keep up the good work. Lu Yi stood up and stretched lazily. I'm going to Bright Heart Peak. If there's anything, send me a message. When passing by Hua Si, he rubbed her head, left this sentence, and pushed the door open. 6th Senior Sister. A clear voice sounded outside the door, as if he had been waiting. Their eyes met, and Sheen was stunned. Fifth Senior Brother? Her gaze moved past Lu Yi and saw Hua Si in the cultivation room, who was tidying up her hair. The smile on her face slowly stiffened. Don't block the way. Lu Yi raised his hand and pressed her head, pulled Sheen to the side, and walked straight in the direction of Tianji Hall. On this day, many people saw Sheen wandering around the encampment like a zombie. From time to time, she muttered things like, "No chance. I've been beaten to it," and so on. During the day, she studied the way of spirit tattoos at Madame Yun's place as usual. When she returned to the encampment at night, Lu Yi did not go to the cultivation room, but went straight to the market. This market was originally a gathering place for rogue cultivators, and Chen Yu was in charge of managing it. Later, the rogue cultivators either became registered disciples of the Jade Blood sect or attached themselves to the Jade Blood sect, so the market was preserved. Compared to before, the market's popularity did not decrease, but increased because more rogue cultivators came here. There were even rogue cultivators attached to the nearby Haotian alliance who came here because of its reputation. This made the market's popularity high. Lu Yi naturally did not stop the disciples and rogue cultivators from coming here to do some small business to subsidize their cultivation. The Jade Blood sect did not have as many rules as other sections. There was only one rule, and that was as long as they did not do anything harmful to the Jade Blood sect. Moreover, because the two nearby forces of the Myriad Devil Ridge had been crippled some time ago, the range of activities of the Jade Blood sect's disciples had increased. The greater the range of activities, the greater the harvest. Lu Yi walked all the way here and found a quiet corner. He took out a sign that he had prepared long ago from his storage bag, and put it aside. Then, he took out a book to study with a leisurely expression. 5th Senior Brother. Some passers-by saw him and hurriedly bowed. Soon, they saw the sign placed beside Lu Yi and could not help but read out, "Free Unlock." Chapter 234. 5th Senior Brother, you can open storage bags? The disciple was curious. He had never seen his 5th Senior Brother with this ability before. Yes. Please wait a moment, Senior Brother. The disciple hurriedly left and soon returned, handing a storage bag to Lu Yi. Please help me open this storage bag, 5th Senior Brother. This was what Lu Yi had chosen from the pile of loot after the insect tide. At that time, there were hundreds of storage pouches piled up in the square, which was why Lu Yi had come here to unlock them for free. Hua Si's storage bag had been dealt with, but the cultivators under the sect still had a lot to deal with. Most of these storage bags came from the Feng clan, so their quality was definitely not as good as Hua Si's. No one knew what was inside. There might be something good, but there might also be a pile of trash. Therefore, the people who obtained the storage bags kept them and didn't go to the nearby Tianji Business Union to open them. They didn't want to lose money. Lu Yi took the storage bag and began to open it. Soon, a group of people gathered around him. Everyone had heard that Lu Yi was helping people open their storage bags for free, so they all came over to take a look. As his spiritual power surged, Lu Yi suddenly frowned. He raised his hand and threw the storage bag in his hand into the air. Everyone looked up, only to see the storage bag burst into flames and turn into a fireball in the blink of an eye. Lu Yi also looked up with a frown. Bad start. The first storage bag was destroyed. Originally, he wanted to use his skills to build a good reputation among the disciples. That way, he would have more storage bags to open. But in the end, he set off fireworks for everyone. The lively scene suddenly quieted down, and the disciples all felt awkward. 5th Senior Brother. The disciple who came over with the storage bag looked at Lu Yi pitifully. Yours is gone. Lu Yi looked at him calmly. There's a risk in opening it. The disciple was dejected. His storage bag was destroyed because of his fifth senior brother. How could he ask his fifth senior brother to compensate? He could only accept his bad luck and comfort himself that the storage bag must be a pile of trash. He didn't feel bad about it at all. Lu Ye's gaze swept across the surroundings. The disciples avoided his gaze, and some even hid their storage pouches behind their backs. You! Lu Yi pointed at a disciple. Give me the storage pouch you're hiding behind you. The disciple was grief-stricken. How could he dare to disobey? He slowly walked up to Lu Yi and handed over the storage pouch that he had hidden earlier. He cautiously said, Fifth senior brother, I'm not in a hurry. Take your time. Lu Yi circulated his spirit energy to break the seal. This time, things went very smoothly. A moment later, Lu Yi threw the bag of holding back to him. All right. The disciple was slightly startled. He hurriedly checked and found that the storage bag was indeed open. He didn't know what good things were inside. He suddenly looked up and laughed. Haha, I'm rich. He chuckled and hurriedly bowed to Lu Yi. Many thanks, fifth senior brother. Next, Lu Yi waved his hand. He really could open the restriction lock. The group of onlookers was surprised. The first storage bag had been destroyed by Lu Yi, so no one dared to try again. Who would have thought that the second one would succeed? Fifth senior brother, this is mine. A female cultivator stepped forward and handed over the storage pouch she had obtained earlier. Lu Yi broke the seal once more and threw it to her after a moment. Thank you, fifth senior brother. You're amazing. The female cultivator praised Lu Yi and ran off happily. With 2 successful precedents, more people dared to try. He succeeded more than 10 times in a row without a single failure. This made the cultivators more confident in Lu Yi. From the looks of it, the first storage bag that was destroyed was not because Lu Yi's skills were bad, but because of luck. The news spread like wildfire and soon, a large number of cultivators gathered and took the initiative to line up. There were occasional failures, but the situation was much better than yesterday. The result of failure was the destruction of the storage pouch. Regarding that, the few disciples could only admit that they were unlucky. He busied himself until dawn before Lu Yi stood up and stretched lazily. He waved his hand and said, Everyone, disperse. We'll continue tonight. For the next few days, Lu Yi set up a stall in the market and only stopped after he had dealt with all the spoils of war that the disciples had obtained previously. With the accumulation of experience in opening locks and the learning from Madame Yun during the day, his attainments in the Tao of spirit tattoos continued to improve. With the improvement of his attainments, it was easier to understand those books. The knowledge he gained from the books increased his own attainments, forming a virtuous cycle. The game with Madame Yun began to level up. Simple breaking of seals was no longer difficult for Lu Yi. Madame Yun began to set up formations for him to break. This was the direction that Lu Yi wanted to learn. His ultimate goal was to break the sect-protecting formations of the various myriad Devil Ridge stations. As long as he had the ability, he could get as many merits as he wanted in the future. A cultivator's daily life, cultivation, and even combat were closely related to spirit tattoos. Therefore, many cultivators were no stranger to spirit tattoos and could even construct some spirit tattoos. However, they were far from being a real spirit tattooist. Take formation cultivation as an example. In fact, it was also a branch of spirit tattooists because setting up a formation involved spirit tattoos. It could be said that any spirit tattooist was an outstanding formation cultivator, but a formation cultivator was not equal to a spirit tattooist. Today, Lu Yi was aware of Madame Yun's teaching guidelines. Everything started from cracking seals. It was the same when she asked Lu Yi to analyze those numerical spirit tattoos at the beginning. Madame Yun didn't teach Lu Yi how to construct restrictions, but Lu Yi had deciphered so many restriction locks on storage pouches during this period of time, so he was already very familiar with the structure of restriction locks. If he had suitable materials, he could even make his own storage pouch right now. Of course, he couldn't guarantee the success rate, but practice made perfect. This was the wisdom of Madame Yun's teaching. First break, then build. When Lu Yi was able to easily break those restrictions, he naturally understood how to construct them. This was because he understood every part of those restrictions very well. Right now, Madame Yun had not taught Lu Yi how to set up the formations, but in the process of breaking the formations, Lu Yi would naturally understand how the formations worked. Once he had perfectly broken through the various formations, he would be able to set up the formations himself. On Mingxin Peak, Madame Yun looked at Lu Yi, who was focused on breaking the formations, with a complicated expression. In her early years, she had actually taught a few disciples, but she had never used this method to teach any of them. This was because although this method was effective quickly, the requirements for talent were too high. If one's talent was insufficient, it would even have the opposite effect. At first, she just tried it a little to see the effect. If it was not suitable, she would change to the normal teaching method. That method was effective slowly, but it was more reliable. However, during this period of time, she found that Lu Yi was very suitable for this teaching method, which made her want to take Lu Yi as her disciple again. The disciples she had taught in her early years were no longer there. As a top spirit tattooist, it was very sad that no one could inherit her mantle. If it was the young man in front of her, he could definitely carry forward her mantle and even surpass her. This idea surged in her heart every day, and finally she could not suppress it. Leaving Lu Yi to break the formations alone, Madame Yun walked out, jumped, and rushed to Shojin Peak. At the same time, the headmaster, who was teaching Yi in Shojin Peak, turned his head to look at Mingxin Peak and hurriedly said, "That's all for today. Go back and practice more." "Yes," Yi responded respectfully. However, she saw the headmaster hurriedly run out, and then the headmaster's fawning voice came from outside. "Yun'er, why are you here?" "Yun'er?" Yi's eyes were full of doubts. She followed him out and saw an unfamiliar beautiful woman standing in front of the headmaster with a cold face. The headmaster changed his usual dignified appearance, and was smiling wholeheartedly. This was that Madame Yun, right? Yi suddenly remembered that Lu Yi had mentioned a person, and Hu Pe had also talked to her about this. After all, Lu Yi often rode Hu Pe to Mingxin Peak, and Hu Pe had seen Madame Yun several times. Shui Yuan appeared out of nowhere and pulled her into the room. Then, she reached out and tore the window paper, sticking one eye on it to look outside. Seeing this, Yi learned from her. "The old man is going to be beaten," Shui Yuan suddenly said. "What?" Yi was shocked. As soon as her voice fell, the dignified Madame Yun punched out, causing the headmaster's head to fly back. With the headmaster's head as the epicenter, a burst of qi exploded. Yi trembled. She felt that Madame Yun's punch could shatter a mountain peak. She didn't know why the headmaster was being beaten, but she saw that the headmaster didn't get angry after being beaten. He wiped the blood from his nose as if nothing had happened and sighed. Yi is already a disciple of Jade Blood Sect. How can he casually take an outsider as his master? Casually? Outsider? Madame Yun's tone suddenly rose. "You're telling me now that I'm an outsider?" No, listen to my explanation." "All right, I'm an outsider." Madame Yun was furious, and the spiritual energy around her began to surge. "Then let me, an outsider, experience the skills of Jade Blood Sect's headmaster." Boom, boom, boom. Outside, powerful spiritual energy fluctuations exploded. Yi watched as the headmaster was sent flying and then disappeared without a trace. Running out to take a look, she saw two figures chasing each other in the sky. It was very lively. From time to time, powerful spiritual energy fluctuations would spread out, but looking at it, it was the headmaster who was being beaten. Facing Madame Yun's continuous attacks, he was at most defending himself and never retaliating. Ai. Shui Yuan sighed. He was very worried. Headmaster won't be beaten to death, right? The old man's bones are tough, he won't die. Also, this kind of thing happens a few times every year. You'll get used to it in the future. He was puzzled. The headmaster was only a spiritual cultivator. Was it really okay for him to be beaten like this? Also, what did it mean that this kind of thing happened a few times every year? She suddenly felt that it really wasn't easy for the headmaster to live until now.